Some men are remembered for the wars they won. Vidura is remembered for the disasters he saw coming in perfect detail while everyone important adjusted their jewelry and ignored him. In a palace full of vows, vanity, secret grudges, and very expensive curtains, he was the one man who kept his footing. He knew which road led to peace. He watched kings choose the other one anyway. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are walking through Hastinapura at night. The heat of the day has finally loosened its grip. Stone corridors breathe out a stored coolness against your bare feet. Lamps burn low in bronze bowls along the walls, and their smoke curls upward in thin blue threads. You smell sandalwood first, then lamp oil, then old silk folded and unfolded for generations. This palace is never fully asleep. Somewhere far off, a guard's spear butt taps the floor in a slow rhythm. Somewhere closer, anklets chime and go still. A night breeze slips through carved screens and stirs the hanging cotton just enough to make shadows move. The whole place feels like it is listening to itself. And in these corridors, if you know where to look, you find him. Not on a throne, not under a white umbrella, not shining with armor, not surrounded by flatterers, not making grand entrances while conches howl. Vidura moves more quietly than that. Crisp linen, steady step, sharp eyes, a face that has learned over many years how to remain calm when everyone else is committed to making the worst possible decision. It is not easy work. Imagine being the only sober man at a wedding where half the guests are insulted, the other half are armed, and the groom's uncle is definitely plotting something. That is only a mild version of life in the Kuru house. You pass a doorway, left slightly open. Inside, a lamp burns beside palm leaf scrolls. A low wooden seat waits near the wall. This is the kind of room Vidura prefers. Not because he is small, because noise wastes time. He is a prince who does not sit where princes sit. He is born in the palace, raised among rulers, trusted by servants, feared by fools, and never allowed to forget that he stands just a little to the side of power. Just enough to see it clearly. Tonight, that is where your journey begins. You will go back to the quiet chamber where his life first took shape, far from fanfare. A strange beginning. A birth threaded with unease, duty, and one of those palace arrangements everyone agrees to without ever calling comfortable. You will feel the hush around his cradle. No trumpets, no wild celebration, yet something deep and watchful has entered the house. You will watch him grow. The princes learn weapons in the yards under the sun. Horses snort, dust rises, bowstrings sing. But Vidura learns something else as well. He learns faces, pauses, hesitation, the dangerous little silence before a lie. He learns law at dawn, ethics at noon, diplomacy by evening, and by night, he learns the most exhausting skill of all. How to tell proud men the truth without getting thrown out of the room before he reaches the important part. He becomes necessary in the way a well is necessary. People may not praise it every morning, but let it dry up and everyone panics. Servants trust him. Elders lean on him. Petitioners wait for him. Even those who dislike him listen. at least for a moment, because his words land with the plain weight of a bronze bell. Dhritarashtra, blind king of the Kurus, turns toward that voice again and again. Bhishma, old as duty itself, knows the worth of that mind. Pandu comes and goes like a troubled wind. The children grow, the house fills, silk rustles, jewels glitter, opinions bloom like summer flies, and still Vidura keeps order, mostly. As much as any one man can keep order in a dynasty where every family meal is one insult away from catastrophe. You will be there when the first shadows lengthen. Duryodhana's envy begins as a look, then hardens into habit. The palace still smells of incense and polished wood, but under it another scent gathers. Hot metal, storm air, the warning before rain. Vidura feels it long before others admit it. He hears the whispered plans. He reads the hunger in restless eyes. He understands that some fires are lit long before anyone sees flame. You will follow him through the lacquer house dread, where danger is wrapped in hospitality and decorated like a festival gift. You will stand with him in corridors where official smiles are smooth and false. You will know the Pandavas are not safe. You will know he knows. That kind of knowledge keeps a man awake. Then the hall of dice. You can almost hear it already. Ivory cubes strike in polished wood, soft at first, harmless if you know nothing. But in this palace, one afternoon can tear open an age. The hall is bright with lamps, gold glows, sandal paste perfumes the air. Men sit in ordered rows, pretending order still means something. And Vidura, steady Vidura, sees the floor giving way beneath them all. He warns them. He warns the king. He warns the prince. He warns the room itself, if walls can listen. But pride is a stubborn disease. It wears silk very well. It quotes duty. It smiles while doing ruinous things. You will feel that ache at the center of his life, to know the right path so clearly, to speak it plainly, to watch it refused. And still, he does not turn cruel. That is the wonder of him. He does not become honey-tongued and slippery. He does not start cheering for chaos just because chaos has seniority in the court. He keeps serving, keeps advising, keeps standing in the doorway between disaster and the people walking toward it with great confidence. Later, you will go with him into the years of exile, when the forest holds the ones the palace cast out. You will return with him to a Hastinapura, thick with dread. You will be there when Krishna comes for peace, and Vidura receives him, not with display, but with simple, clean devotion. No theater, no glittering trap, just hospitality that breathes easy. And when all warnings fail, you will hear the distant thunder of Kurukshetra. Conches at dawn, dust over the plain, the end coming closer with every chariot wheel. Vidura will see that too. The final unraveling, the field claiming sons, brothers, teachers, friends, all the grief he tried to prevent arriving at last in royal measure. No one applauds then. No one says he was right in the way that repairs anything. Palaces are very poor at apology. Still, he remains himself. After the war, when victory tastes like ash and perfumed oil, burns beside sleepless old men, Vidura is there, in dim rooms, in long nights, in the company of grief. His wisdom does not flash like a weapon. It endures like a lamp protected by the hand. So come deeper into the palace. The lamps are low. The stone is cool. Beyond one more carved doorway waits the beginning of Vidura's life, and the house that will spend years needing him more than it knows. Before the dice, before the war, before anyone starts pretending they were surprised, there is a child born, where nobody important is looking. The smell is different now. Not forest damp and leaf shadow, not exile smoke. You are back inside Hastinapura, and the air in the old palace tastes of oil lamps, cooling rice, medicinal herbs, and grief that has been folded away but not removed. The corridors are polished, the banners still hang. Servants still move softly with brass trays and lowered eyes. But the house has lost its center. King Vishitravirya is gone. Too young, too soon, no son behind him. That is how dynasties begin to panic. You can feel it in the women's apartments first. Silk rustles, where no one is sleeping. Anklets sound at wrong hours. Doors open, close, open again. Messengers go in and out, carrying sealed instructions and faces arranged into calm. The kind of calm that means absolutely nothing is calm. At the heart of it all sits Satyavati. She is older now, still formidable, still carrying that hard, practical strength that once drew a king into trouble and changed the course of a kingdom. She has buried one son already. Now she has lost another. The throne is standing there like an empty chariot, reins dropped, horses nervous. You can almost hear the future snorting in the dark. Bhishma is there too, of course. Bhishma, with his terrible vow wrapped around the whole family like an iron chain, polished to a shine. He is loyal, magnificent, disciplined, impossible. He can protect the throne. He can manage the kingdom. He can terrify enemies. What he cannot do is give the dynasty an heir. That was the point of the vow. Wonderful for honor, terrible for logistics. So Satyavati does what powerful women in endangered palaces have always done. She stops waiting for men to become less complicated and starts arranging survival herself. Night gathers over the palace. The moon lifts pale above the courtyards. White flowers open in the gardens and release a cool, faint sweetness into the hot dark. Somewhere, a conch sounds for evening rites. Somewhere else, in a servant's passage, two women whisper and immediately fall silent when footsteps approach. You are standing near the carved doorway when Satyavati remembers another son. Not one born in marriage, not one raised in silk. A son from before all this, Vyasa. He was born to her long ago by the sage Parashara on a river wrapped in mist. That old secret now returns through the palace gates, like a storm no one ordered and everyone needs. He is summoned. And he comes. Not with a royal procession, not with perfume and jewels and the soft manners of court. He comes from the wilderness carrying the smell of river water, bark, long austerity, sun-baked skin, and smoke from lonely fires. His hair is matted. His presence is sharp enough to make servants step back without understanding why. You feel it at once, the kind that brings the forest indoors. Satyavati receives him with urgency tucked under dignity. As she tells him what has happened. The sons are gone. The widowed queens remain. The line must continue. The kingdom cannot sit empty while ambitious men begin counting opportunities. So the old custom is invoked. The queens of Vishitravirya will bear sons through the sage, so the line may live. No one in this palace is exactly delighted. The lamps burn low. The chamber smells of clarified butter, old sandalwood, and the faint metal scent of anxiety. You can feel the tension in the carved bedposts, in the drawn curtains, in the silence between each instruction. The first queen is Ambika. She is prepared, as well as such a woman can be prepared, for an arrangement like this, which is to say, not at all. She has been widowed young. She has already had her life turned into a matter of succession. Now she is told to receive a sage she has never known for the sake of a kingdom that will later speak endlessly of duty and very little of her comfort. She enters the chamber. Vyasa enters too. He is not trying to charm anybody. He is a sage, not a court peacock. He looks exactly like years of austerity should look. Wild hair, fierce eyes, a body lean from discipline, no scented oil, no softening smile, no effort to ease the fear in the room. Ambika sees him and closes her eyes, shuts them tight. When the night is over, Vyasa leaves and tells Satyavati that the son born from this union will be strong and powerful, but blind. And so it happens. Dhritarashtra comes into the world, unable to see the sun, the court, the faces bending over him, the concern hidden in ceremonial blessings. He's royal. He's firstborn among the new heirs. He's also marked from the beginning. The palace adjusts. The palace adjusts around him all the same. A second night is arranged. The second queen is Ambalika. By now the women's chambers are full of apprehension. You can feel it clinging to the walls like summer heat. Servants bring bath water, incense, fresh cloth, and all the meaningless refinements people use when they cannot improve the actual situation. Ambalika goes in. She sees Vyasa, and all the color leaves her face. Not a scream, not a collapse. Just that sudden draining shock when the body tells the truth before the mouth can manage it. Vyasa comes out and tells Satyavati that this son will be pale, fragile, touched by weakness. And so Pandu is born, fair-skinned, noble, fit in shape, but carrying delicacy in the blood. Another heir, another compromise, another reminder that fear leaves marks. Satyavati is not satisfied. She wants a child whole in body, steady in mind, fit to carry a dynasty already wobbling like a cart with one cracked wheel. She asks Vyasa to return once more to Ambika. Ambika, hearing this, does something very human. She refuses without saying so directly. No dramatic scene, no royal rebellion, just one quiet, practical act of avoidance. When the appointed night comes, she sends in her place a maidservant. Now the whole tale changes. The chamber chosen for this third meeting is not grand. No one is wasting the palace's finest ceremonial arrangements on a servant standing in for a queen. The room is smaller, cooler, less watched. A single lamp burns near the wall. The cotton curtains are plain. Fresh water waits in a bronze vessel. The floor is smooth stone under bare feet, and the woman who enters is calm. That is the difference. You feel it immediately. No royal trembling, no offended pride, no performance of reluctance. She is attentive, respectful, composed. She has lived close enough to power to understand its moods and far enough beneath it to avoid its vanities. She receives the sage as a guest worthy of honor. She washes his feet. She offers him a seat. She does not flinch from his appearance. She does not shut her eyes. She does not blanch and look away. She is simply present. In a palace full of people acting roles, one unnoticed woman behaves like an actual human being. It is almost revolutionary. The lamp flame steadies. Outside, night insects sing in the courtyard garden. The smell of jasmine drifts through the lattice with a little warm wind. Somewhere in the distance, a guard taps his spear on stone and turns at the end of his watch. You are there in the quiet of that room, and for the first time in this whole desperate business, nothing feels twisted. Vyasa sees it too. He's pleased. When he emerges, he tells Satyavati that the child born of this union will be wise, righteous, and clear-minded beyond all the others. But There is always a but in Hastinapura. Because the mother is a maidservant, the child will not inherit the throne. There it is, the whole life in one breath, clarity without kingship, belonging without acceptance, nearness to power without permission to hold it. The child is born, Vidura. The palace receives him politely, not coldly, not cruelly, not openly. That would be too simple. The palace does something softer and more lasting instead. They do something softer and more permanent. They place you exactly where you may be useful, and just as exactly where you may not rise. So Vidura grows in the shadowed middle place. He's of the household, but not at its center. He's of royal blood, but not named for royal future. He walks the same corridors, learns the same histories, hears the same drums at festival dawn, smells the same monsoon rain blowing into the courtyards, watches the same peacocks strut along the parapets in the hot season as if they personally invented splendor. But doors open for others that do not open for him, not because he lacks worth, because he has too much of the wrong kind. You can feel how early he must have understood this. Children know, long before anyone explains rank and law and inheritance. Children know who is waited for and who is expected to wait. They know whose mistakes are forgiven as youthful spirit and whose brilliance is filed quietly into service. Vidura would have known, and yet there is no bitterness clinging to his name at the beginning. That is one of the things that makes him so rare. He does not spend his youth snarling at the walls. He watches, learns, absorbs. He becomes inwardly steady in a household that trains everyone else toward collision. The palace by then has 3 boys growing beneath its roofs. Dhritarashtra, blind and powerful, hearing everything twice as sharply because he must. Pandu, pale and disciplined, the one people look at with practical hope. Vidura, born from the servant's chamber, carrying a mind clean as river water over stone. 3 brothers, same father, 3 fates already leaning away from one another. Morning in Hastinapura arrives with bells, hoof sounds, chanting priests, and the slap of wet cloth as courtyards are washed before sunrise. You can see the boys in those first years, one guided by the arm, one standing straight under the weight of expectation, one watching everyone and missing very little. Bhishma oversees the household like a mountain that somehow learned administration. He would have seen Vidura's quality quickly, not the kind of quality that dazzles a tournament, not the kind that wins applause from men who like noise. Vidura's gifts are quieter, memory, judgment, the ability to hear what someone means beneath what they say, the evenness that keeps panic from spreading, the inconvenient habit of noticing consequences while everyone else is still admiring their own intentions, not flashy, essential. You have met this kind of soul before. Every large family has one. Every kingdom desperately needs 3. Hastinapura gets one and mostly ignores him. There is another current moving beneath all this, older and stranger than palace law. It does not announce itself with thunder. It moves like a hidden river. Long before Vidura's birth, the powers that guard righteousness had already been stirred. There had been a curse, quiet but heavy, laid upon Dharma himself. A sage, angry at unjust punishment, had spoken words that do not simply vanish. So Dharma, Lord of Justice, the unseen weight behind truth and consequence, was fated to be born among men, not as a king, not wrapped in celestial signs, not with drums shaking the city, as Vidura. It fits in its own severe way. If righteousness must enter a troubled palace, of course It would come where no garlands wait. Of course, it would arrive through the woman who stayed calm. Of course, it would be denied the throne and seated instead near the conscience of the house. The sacred thread of it hums under his life, never loudly, just enough to make certain things ring true. The way some people step into a room and confusion lessens. The way some faces remain composed before greed, fear, and flattery. The way certain words, when they finally come, land like bells in fog. As Vidura grows, that hidden brightness does not make him grand. It makes him exact. He knows scripture, law, custom, conduct. But more than that, he knows people. And that is always the harder study. He sees how Dhritarashtra aches under blindness and the old wound of not being first in every way that counts. He sees Pandu carrying kingship before he ever wears it, like a weight laid on his shoulders by other men's limitations. He sees Satyavati holding the dynasty together with hands already tired. He sees Bhishma guarding the throne with absolute devotion and no children of his own, like a man watering a garden he will never sit in. And through all of it, Vidura understands something terrible and useful. A house can be full of noble people and still move toward ruin. Especially then. The seasons pass over Hastinapura. Summer dust settles on the balcony rails. The stone floors grow hot by noon and cool only after moonrise. Then monsoon comes, drumming on tiled roofs, washing the city walls dark, filling the air with wet earth and neem. Then winter's thin silver mornings when breath ghosts for a moment and servants hurry with charcoal braziers. In all those seasons, Vidura grows where no prophecy of kingship protects him. That changes a man. It gives him freedom, in one sense. No one expects him to seize power. No one flatters him into stupidity. No one wastes time teaching him royal vanity, that most expensive of useless arts. He is allowed to become competent, and competence in a palace is dangerously attractive. Servants trust him first. That always happens before nobles catch on. A boy who speaks fairly to workers will one day hear everything. The kitchen knows who is angry. The gatekeepers know who arrived late and left too soon. The women carrying water know which queen has cried and which prince has thrown a cup at the wall. The stable boys know when a hunting party was really a secret meeting. A kingdom runs on people whose names are seldom embroidered anywhere. Vidura belongs just enough to rank that they must respect him, and far enough from royal arrogance that they do not fear him. So truth reaches him. A slipped comment here, a troubled glance there, a small dispute over grain measures in 1/4 of the city, a merchant muttering about unfair collection, a nurse whispering that one brother resents another. Tiny things, palace people ignore tiny things until one day they become war. Vidura does not ignore them. You can almost see him as a young man crossing a courtyard at dawn, the hem of his plain garments brushing cool stone, the eastern sky just going pink beyond the battlements, peacocks yelling from a garden wall like outraged old officials. He is carrying tablets, memory, duty, and no illusions. That last one matters most. Others in the palace still dream in the language of inheritance and glory. Vidura dreams in consequences. He understands, even from the beginning, that the throne is not a jewel to admire. It is a seat from which one wrong weakness can poison generations, and he will never sit there. That paradox becomes the shape of his life. You feel it now, standing in these early years before the great disasters have names. He belongs to Hastinapura, like a foundation stone, belongs to a palace. Essential, mostly unseen, never crowned. He is the son of the quiet chamber, the child born from one night without fear, the boy who inherited no kingdom and something better: clarity. Outside, evening settles over the city again. Ghee lamps are being lit one by one in niches along the walls. Their flames lean gently in the warm draft. The smell of incense rises. Somewhere in the inner court, someone is practicing veena. Just a few notes, then stopping, then beginning again. You stand for a moment in that half-light and see it as it was. The anxious queens, the old matriarch refusing to let the line fail. The wild sage entering civilization like a storm in bark cloth. The servant woman, unnoticed by history's loudest mouths, meeting him with quiet dignity. And the child who comes from that stillness, not the eldest, not the strongest, not the heir, and yet somehow the clearest-eyed soul in the whole blind house. The night deepens around the palace roofs. The river beyond the city moves black and slow under stars. A breeze carries the scent of lotus pools and lamp smoke through the carved stone screens. In one chamber, a baby sleeps without a crown. In time, kings will depend on him. In time, princes will ignore him. In time, an empire will discover too late what kind of man was born that night. For now, he is only Vidura. Small hands, soft breath, a future folded around him like cotton. And the palace, not knowing what it has been given, goes on breathing in the dark. And then the boys grow taller, the boughs get heavier, and the palace fills with that familiar royal fragrance. Ambition mixed with incense. Morning in Hastinapura begins before sunrise. The stone corridors still hold the night's coolness. Lamps gutter low. Somewhere a conch sounds from a shrine room. Somewhere else, much less sacredly, a cook is already arguing over sesame oil. You can smell wet clay from the courtyards just washed down, sandalwood smoke from the household altars, old silk airing from carved chests, and the faint metallic scent of weapons being cleaned. This is the world Vidura grows into, not at the center of it. Never quite there, but always near enough to see everything. Bhishma moves through the palace like an oath given human form. White robes, white beard, straight back, the kind of presence that makes even lazy nephews sit upright for half a breath. Under his eye, the young princes learn posture, memory, restraint, and the exhausting art of being born into a dynasty that expects greatness before breakfast. Dhritarashtra learns by touch and sound. Pandu learns by burden. Vidura learns by listening. He listens to sandals on polished floors and knows who is angry before they reach the doorway. He listens to a pause in a servant's voice and hears fear. He listens to the elders speak of law and inheritance and tribute and grain, and while other boys remember the glorious parts, Vidura remembers the dangerous parts, the exceptions, the consequences, the little words that turn justice sideways. You see him there in the early lessons, not wrapped in the richest cloth, not glittering, not trying to impress anyone with the angle of his chin, just still, alert, taking everything in. The palace boys train in many things: archery in the dust of the outer grounds, sword forms beneath the hard white sun, recitation in shaded halls, where palm leaf manuscripts lie stacked like patient birds, law in cool chambers with stone benches, diplomacy at tables where nobody says exactly what they mean. And in all of it, Vidura becomes dangerous in a very particular way. He understands. That is always dangerous. By midday, the training grounds bake. Dust clings to ankles. Bowstrings hum. Horses stamp in the heat. Bhishma watches practice with that terrible calm of his, saying very little, which somehow feels worse than a scolding. Pandu throws himself at every discipline with fierce, bright concentration. Dhritarashtra, denied the sight others lean on, develops strength in the body and sharpness in hearing. But each success has a shadow in it. He knows what the world sees first when it looks at him. Not prince, blind prince. That second word bruises more. Vidura sees that bruise, though he never names it carelessly. He learns when to advise and when to wait. He learns that pride in a royal house is like clarified butter near fire. You do not wave lamps around unless you want the whole place aflame. Still, even as a boy, he cannot entirely stop himself from telling the truth. A tutor asks the princes to judge a simple dispute. Two merchants claim the same bolt of costly cloth. Pandu wants speed. Dhritarashtra wants authority. One says, decide at once. The other says, bring more witnesses and let rank settle it. Vidura asks who first reported the missing cloth. Not the merchants, their wives. Where are the wives? In the waiting court, hot, tired, and increasingly annoyed that the men have been making this into a royal drama all morning. Vidura calls them in. One woman points at the hem of her husband's garment, where a strip has been freshly torn. The other snorts in vindication so sharp it could cut betel nut. Matter settled. Pandu laughs first. Even Bhishma's mouth almost moves. Dhritarashtra says nothing for a moment, then asks Vidura how he saw what the others missed. Vidura tells him he looked for who had no reason to perform. That answer lingers. You are standing in that courtyard with the others, warm stone underfoot, neem shade trembling above, hearing distant parrots screech from the palace gardens. You can almost feel the shift, small but real. The boys are still boys, yet already one of them is becoming the person everyone turns to when appearances start lying. And appearances in Hastinapura lie all the time. One season rolls into another. Monsoon comes with the smell of wet earth, rising rich and dark from the palace gardens. Rain rattles against carved eaves. The training grounds become slick brown fields where everybody looks less majestic and more like damp, irritated herons. Royal dignity suffers badly in mud. Pandu slips once during spear practice and rises furious at the ground itself. Dhritarashtra, hearing exactly where he fell, asks if the earth won. Vidura, nearby, murmurs that on most days the earth eventually wins against everyone. Even Bhishma lets that one pass. When the rains end, the city brightens. Markets swell. Petitioners crowd the outer halls. Traders arrive with sandalwood, dyed cotton, sesame, salt, copper vessels, peacocks in cages, goats that do not appreciate their role in ritual life, and rumors from 3 kingdoms away. Vidura begins spending more time where the kingdom actually breathes. Not in the grand hall first, in the side courts, at dawn hearings, near the treasury door, by the grain records, under awnings where scribes sit cross-legged with ink-stained fingers and expressions of permanent grievance. He watches how the city works when no one is trying to look heroic. That is where his education deepens. A widow comes with a boundary complaint. Her late husband's cousins have shifted the field stones by a few handspans during the night. Nothing dramatic, just enough to steal next season's water. Pandu, already impatient from council matters, thinks it is too small for royal attention. Vidura asks for the irrigation map. He has memorized it. When the cousins arrive, jeweled, offended, and very sure the matter can be smothered in family language, Vidura walks them through the channels, the slope of the land, the old mango tree used as the original marker, and the tax record from 3 harvests back. He does it gently, calmly, thoroughly. By the end, the cousins are apologizing to the widow while pretending they had planned to all along. The widow leaves blessing the court. The cousins leave hating arithmetic. This happens again and again. A caravan dispute, a temple donation gone missing, a stable master blaming a groom for lame horses when the real problem is watered grain. 2 priests fighting over festival precedents, with enough wounded dignity to stock a small kingdom. Everyone arrives certain their case is unique. Almost all of them are wrong. Vidura sits through it like a man bailing a boat with a spoon while the river keeps inventing new water. It should be exhausting. It is exhausting, but he is good at it. Servants learn his habits before nobles do. They know he hears the whole answer. They know he notices if someone stands too long waiting outside the chamber. They know he remembers names. A lamp-bearer's son develops a fever, and the physician assigned to common staff delays because a noble aunt has a digestive complaint of great ceremonial importance. Vidura rearranges the physician's visits without fuss and has medicinal herbs sent quietly. The boy recovers. The lamp-bearer says nothing in public because that is how palaces work. But from then on, any servant with sense trusts Vidura before they trust men twice his rank. In a place like Hastinapura, that matters. By afternoon, the palace changes mood. Jewelry appears, voices rise, perfume thickens. Court is a theater where everyone enters already half offended. One lord thinks another bowed too little. One aunt suspects a slight in the seating order. One visiting chief brings gifts grand enough to imply equality and modest enough to deny insult, which is a difficult balance and rarely successful. Vidura moves through all this in plain dignity, while others flash gold and temper. You almost have to admire the absurdity. A kingdom can survive drought, invasion, and bad harvests, but seat one uncle slightly farther from the king than he expected, and suddenly the fate of civilization feels uncertain. There are evenings when Bhishma summons the princes and younger nobles to hear old histories and laws. The hall is lit with rows of ghee lamps. Moths turn foolishly in the flame light. The air smells of warm oil, old cedar chests, and jasmine drifting in from the women's court. Bhishma speaks of kings long gone, of treaties held and broken, of when to tax and when not to, of why a ruler must master himself before he masters a province. Pandu listens like a man already hearing the call of responsibility. Dhritarashtra listens with a stillness that can look like serenity if you do not know him. Vidura listens as if each word is a seed that must be planted correctly later, because later comes quickly. Pandu is crowned. The day is magnificent and uneasy. Conches, white umbrellas, horses plaited with bells, priests chanting, garlands heavy with marigold and champaka, the scent of clarified butter and incense, so thick it almost feels edible. You stand among the crowd and feel both celebration and strain. Dhritarashtra is the elder. Pandu becomes king. That fact settles into the palace like a stone into water. No one can pretend it makes no ripples. Dhritarashtra is composed in public. Very composed. Too composed, perhaps. His hands, resting on the carved arm of his seat, tighten only once. Vidura sees it. Bhishma sees it too. No one says anything. What is there to say? The kingdom has chosen according to custom and fear. A blind king, would invite uncertainty, they tell themselves. A seeing one invites order. Perhaps, perhaps not. Royal certainty is often just anxiety wearing expensive cloth. Pandu takes the burden seriously. That is his glory and his weariness. He rides out to inspect border posts. He hears reports on tribute and roads. He studies troop movements, grain storage, alliances, marriages, resentments, and the eternal mystery of why officials become idiots the moment paperwork appears. Vidura becomes indispensable to him, not loudly. Indispensable quietly is the more lasting kind. Pandu asks him to review petitions before council, to organize legal cases, to draft replies that are firm without being foolish, to receive envoys whose pride must be massaged before business can begin. Vidura does these things well because he sees that rule is not only battle and sacrifice. It is grain arriving on time, roads not washed out, widows not cheated, tax collectors not acting like hungry wolves, temple lands not swallowing village wells, messengers not sleeping with the letter under their head for 2 days because they found a comfortable tree. Kingdoms are held together by these boring miracles. Vidura knows it. Others learn it from him. There is a scene, small enough to be missed, that tells you almost everything. A minor feud breaks out between two border officials. One claims the other withheld cavalry support during a raid. The other claims the first sent false reports to hide his own delay. By the time they reach Hastinapura, both men are polished, perfumed, armored, and furious. They bow beautifully and then begin trying to ruin each other with exquisite courtesy. Pandu is ready to find them both. Vidura asks one question: who fed the horses on the 3rd day of the raid? Silence. Neither official knows. A stable captain, called in from the side yard, knows. Of course he knows. He knows because he did it himself, after both commanders left their men in confusion while sending complaints up the chain of command. Vidura follows the thread from there. By sunset, the truth is clear. The raid failed not from treachery, but vanity. Each man cared more for receiving credit than for supporting the other. Pandu finds them both anyway. Vidura privately advises he also reward the stable captain. He does. The next week, half the palace suddenly remembers that competence may be worth more than jewelry. Only half, sadly. The smell in the records chamber is dust, ink, dried palm leaves, and human patience wearing thin. This is one of Vidura's kingdoms too. Scribes grumble. Accountants blink at columns until their eyes go red. Couriers arrive sweating through their tunics. Seals are pressed into wax. Grain tallies are checked against temple demands and military allotments. Vidura can hold numbers in his head the way other men hold grudges. A tax discrepancy in the western villages, a missing shipment of sesame, an overcount in elephant fodder. A prince may forget a face. Vidura remembers the exact amount misreported 2 months before and asks for the original tally board. This is how he gains power without title. He becomes the man who knows where everything is and who is lying. Sometimes this makes him unpopular. Actually, often. A nobleman once assumes Vidura, born of a maid, will be easy to flatter and easier to dismiss. He arrives dripping with perfume and self-importance, speaking as if doing the court a favor by appearing in it. His estate taxes are late, but he has a charming explanation involving floods, thieves, and exceptionally disloyal stewards. Vidura listens. He asks after the nobleman's new pleasure pavilion by the river. The man brightens, delighted. Yes, splendid timber, imported tiles, musicians from Avanti. very tasteful. Vidura nods and asks, almost idly, whether floods spared only the pavilion and not the tax grain. The chamber goes still. Even the scribes enjoy that one. The nobleman pays within the week. You are there in the side hall, hearing bangles chime as attendants pass, feeling the breeze from a panka fan, smelling lotus paste and dust and hot parchment. You can almost smile. Hastinapura is full of men who think rank is intelligence. Vidura keeps ruining that illusion, and he does it with terrifying politeness. Yet court life is not all dry wit and legal precision. There are family evenings too, festivals, ritual baths, birth ceremonies, feasts where musicians play veena and drum, while cooks carry platters fragrant with cumin, black pepper, honeyed sweets, roasted roots, rice shining with ghee. Dhritarashtra laughs more easily in private then. Pandu sometimes sets duty down for an hour and remembers youth. Bhishma almost seems less severe when children run through the women's halls, trailing flower petals and scandalizing nurses. Vidura belongs in these moments as well, not as ornament, as steadiness. When a young cousin falls and splits a lip on carved stone, it is Vidura who scoops him up before the nurses arrive. When a ceremonial gift gets sent to the wrong branch of the family, and offense blooms like mold after rain, it is Vidura who redirects the trays before three matriarchs declare open emotional warfare. When a visiting ruler drinks too much spiced wine and mistakes the genealogy of his hosts, it is Vidura who turns the conversation toward horses until everyone survives. This too is statecraft. No one writes songs about it. Perhaps they should. Meanwhile, Dhritarashtra's inner life grows heavier. He is prince, elder brother, son of the line, and yet not king. He marries Gandhari, who binds her own eyes in dark cloth and enters his world by choice. The whole palace talks of devotion. They talk of it endlessly. Palaces adore a grand gesture, much easier than fixing anything. Vidura receives her with proper honor. He also understands something quieter. Two people can share darkness and still not share peace. Dhritarashtra wants dignity. He wants authority. He wants not to need help. Yet a kingdom is always reminding him that he does. Vidura becomes one of the few people who can guide him without making the guidance feel like insult. Read this seal. That messenger hesitated before answering. This envoy's voice says one thing, his escort another. The grain report sounds polished because it was rehearsed. Your steward fears the prince from Gandhara. The kitchen staff know which ministers are bribing whom. Kitchens always know first. Dhritarashtra begins depending on Vidura more than he admits. That dependence carries affection in it, also irritation. No one enjoys needing the brother who sees too clearly. As for Pandu, kingship does not sit lightly on him. He bears it with effort, which is better than bearing it with vanity. But effort has a cost. Campaigns draw him away. Duties pile high. Messengers come at all hours. The palace sometimes feels like a great beast that must be fed documents, decisions, signatures, and human attention, or it begins chewing its own tail. Whenever Pandu departs, Vidura holds the inner machinery steady. Hear the cases, review the storehouses, speak with Bhishma, keep Dhritarashtra informed without feeding old wounds, manage the offended, the frightened, the ambitious, and the incompetent. In other words, manage everybody. There are nights when he leaves council late and the moonlight lies white on the courtyard stones. The air is cooler then, touched with night-blooming jasmine and the distant smell of river water. Somewhere guards murmur. Somewhere temple bells sound the last watch. You can picture Vidura pausing there. Just a moment. One man in plain cloth beneath the carved balconies of a royal house. Not king, never king, and yet the one carrying so much of the kingdom's sense. This is how it happens. Not with a proclamation, not with a jewel. People simply begin turning toward him. A steward with a problem, a prince with a question, a servant with a fear, a minister with a draft too clumsy to survive scrutiny, a queen's attendant needing a dispute quieted, a merchant wanting fairness, a child wanting honesty. The prince without a crown becomes the hinge on which the household swings. And because this is Hastinapura, nobody says thank you nearly enough. Why would they? They are busy being royal, busy brooding, boasting, marrying, resenting, feasting, vowing, hunting, fasting, displaying, suspecting, and occasionally governing. Vidura, meanwhile, keeps the lamps trimmed, keeps the records straight, keeps tempers from becoming policy, keeps grief from becoming recklessness, keeps truth alive in rooms where comfort would be easier. The years move, silk changes fashion, children are born, old men grow older, the river keeps flowing past the city walls, and in chamber after chamber, courtyard after courtyard, one fact becomes impossible to miss. The safest mind in Hastinapura belongs to the man who will never sit on its throne. Not yet does the household understand what that will cost them. For now, the days still hold order. For now, the drums at dusk still sound like stability. For now, the banners above the palace still hang full and bright in the evening wind. But in royal houses, trouble rarely arrives banging a gong. It starts as mood, a bruise to pride, a joke remembered too long, a comparison made at the wrong feast, a child taught to count love as inheritance. And somewhere in those widening halls, while incense curls toward painted ceilings and the night servants light the last row of lamps, the next generation is already stirring. You can feel it before anyone names it. The air changes, not much, just enough. For a little while, it almost works. There are marriages, treaties, polished speeches, and that brief, suspicious calm that settles over royal houses when everyone is smiling too carefully. Courtyards are washed at dawn, brass lamps shine, musicians play in the evening, servants move with trays of sweet milk, cardamom, and fried breads, silk rustles, anklets sing. The whole palace smells of sandal paste and hot ghee and flowers laid out before shrines. And under it all, something mean is growing. Vidura feels it first in the pauses, not in the grand declarations, in the pauses after them. Duryodhana is older now, taller, strong in the shoulders, hard in the jaw, dressed exactly like a prince who expects to be obeyed. He laughs when required. He bows to elders. He performs all the outer movements correctly. But envy has begun to live inside him like a hot coal, and sometimes it glows through the cracks. It happens in banquet halls. A messenger arrives with news of the Pandavas being praised somewhere. Duryodhana's fingers tighten around a goblet. A bard sings of Bhima's strength. The prince's smile becomes too still. Someone mentions Arjuna's skill, almost casually, and the air around the Kaurava brothers changes by a grain, by a breath, by the smallest turn of the head. Vidura notices. He always notices. You are standing near one of those carved pillars when it happens again. You can smell lamp smoke and saffron rice. A conch has just sounded for the evening meal. Gold catches firelight on wrists and necks. No one says anything dangerous. That would be too easy. Instead, men praise one branch of the family in front of the other and then pretend surprise when the room cools. Vidura watches Duryodhana the way a man watches weather over dry grass. And Shakuni watches too. Shakuni is always soft-handed and sharp-eyed, always dressed beautifully, always looking as though nothing in the world can truly trouble him except poor hospitality. He plays with dice the way other men play with prayer beads. Tap, turn, smile. Tap, turn, smile. He does not create Duryodhana's resentment. He feeds it, very delicately, like a man keeping coals alive under ash. Karna is there more often now too. He comes like a flame to dry straw, proud, wounded, brilliant, impossible to ignore. Duryodhana loves him for exactly the reasons everyone else finds him dangerous. Karna says aloud what others swallow. He honors friendship with frightening completeness. If Duryodhana is offended, Karna is offended harder. So the circle tightens. Dhritarashtra feels it and refuses to feel it. That is his specialty. At night, when the corridors grow quiet and the marble gives back the day's warmth in slow, fading breaths, Vidura walks alone with a lamp in his hand. The wick trembles. Moths tap at the flame. Somewhere far off, a guard coughs. Somewhere closer, voices stop the instant he turns a corner. He is not surprised. Plots in Hastinapura do not thunder. They slide. A servant hears one half of an order while pouring wine. A groom notices that certain horses are being readied without announcement. A cook sees rich provisions set aside for a journey no one has publicly mentioned. A carpenter is told to work quickly and ask nothing. By dawn, Vidura knows more than the men who gave the instructions. This is the strange gift of being underestimated. People think the man who listens is weaker than the man who shouts. They are wrong. The shouter announces himself. The listener learns where the knives are being wrapped. Soon, the whispers take shape. Varanavata, a festival, a pleasant trip, a change of scene for the sons of Pandu. It is all spoken in the language of affection. Dhritarashtra suggests it with practiced warmth. There will be festivities there, he says, pleasant gardens, public celebration. The people would love to see the princes. Why should they not go? Why, indeed? Vidura hears the sweetness in the king's voice and feels tired all the way into his bones. Because hidden beneath the invitation is Duryodhana's impatience. The Pandavas are popular, too popular. Yudhishthira grows into his dignity more each season. Bhima cannot be intimidated. Arjuna shines wherever he stands. Even the twins, graceful as young sala trees, gather affection like flowers gather bees. Duryodhana has had enough of sharing sunlight. The man sent ahead is Purochana. That alone is enough. Purochana is useful in all the wrong ways. Too eager, too smooth. The sort of man who bows deeply while measuring where to place the torch. He rides to Varanavata before the princes, and workers begin at once on a splendid residence. Splendid. That is the word used. Fragrant woods, fine fabrics, lac, resin, hemp, oil, ghee. A lovely house if your idea of loveliness is something that will burn like summer grass. Vidura does not storm into court. That would only drive the plot deeper underground. Instead, he does what he does best. He waits, he confirms, he learns how the walls are being sealed, how the floors are layered, how the perfumes are being used to cover the sharper scent beneath. If you had stood near that house before the final plastering, you would have smelled it at once. Sweet, thick, sticky, wrong. Resin warming in the sun. oil buried under incense, beauty with a fever underneath. The Pandavas prepare to leave. The city gathers to bless them. Garlands swing from gateways. Women lean from balconies. Priests murmur over sacred water. Dhritarashtra speaks tenderly. Duryodhana behaves impeccably. Shakuni looks almost bored. Vidura steps close to Yudhishthira before the departure. He cannot speak plainly. Too many years, too many clever enemies. So he wraps warning inside riddle. As a careful man wraps a blade in cloth, he tells Yudhishthira, there are weapons not made of iron. He reminds him that one who knows the path beneath the ground escapes the fire above. He urges watchfulness, patience, silence. Yudhishthira understands. Of course he does. Yudhishthira hears him. His face does not change, but he hears. The chariots roll out. Hooves beat dust from the road. Citizens wave until the road bends. Vidura stands with folded hands until the banners disappear, and only then allows his face to harden. The heat that season is brutal. Varanavata bakes under a white sky. The river shrinks at the edges. The earth smells baked and powdery by afternoon, then briefly sweet at dusk when water is thrown over courtyards. The lacquer house gleams. Purochana fusses over every detail like a bridegroom with terrible intentions. The Pandavas enter smiling. Bhima probably wants to tear the place apart on sight. Arjuna notices every exit. Kunti understands enough to keep her fear hidden. Yudhishthira does what he must. He acts grateful. He admires the house. He praises the arrangements. And then they wait. A miner loyal to Vidura reaches them in secret. At night, while Purochana sleeps in confidence and the town settles into its warm, insect-humming darkness, a tunnel begins to grow beneath the house. Earth is carried out bit by bit. Tools are muffled. Footsteps are counted. Every sound matters. You can feel the closeness of that air, packed soil, clay under the fingernails, sweat gathering at the throat, oil lamps burning low so the flame does not give them away. Above, in the shining rooms, fine mats and cushions and painted walls. Below, darkness and survival. Above them, the painted rooms wait in silence. Below them, the earth keeps their secret. Upstairs, ceremony. Underneath, frantic digging. The days pass, then more days. The waiting itself becomes a kind of fire. Bhima prowls like a caged lion. Kunti keeps the household steady. Yudhishthira measures time in silence. And every night, Purochana, fool that he is, sleeps inside the very trap he built for others. There is something almost comical in that, if you're in the mood for dark comedy. The man designed a death house and then moved in personally, apparently trusting flammable architecture more than divine justice. Bold choice. At last, the moment comes. There is a feast. There is drink. There is enough confusion to soften the edges of attention. A Nishada woman and her sons, wandering and weary, are given food and shelter. Night thickens. The town grows quiet. Then the house is set alight. Flame loves lacquer. It runs fast. Too fast for shouts to matter much. Too fast for anyone outside to do more than stare in horror as the lovely house becomes a furnace of light. Sparks leap into the black sky. People cry out. Clay walls crack. Heat rolls across the street in hard waves. The smell is terrible, even from a distance. Burning resin, timber, cloth, paint, all of it pouring into the night. And beneath it, through the tunnel, the Pandavas go. You are down there with them for a breathless moment. The ceiling is low. The air is hot even underground. Earth crumbles at the shoulder. Someone ahead stumbles. Someone behind catches a wrist. No one dares speak louder than necessary. Above, the world is ending. Below, survival smells like dirt and sweat and lamp smoke caught in the lungs. Then cool air, then open night. They emerge beyond the reach of the flames and move quickly into the dark. The stars are sharp. Reeds whisper by the water. Somewhere behind them, the town still roars around the blaze, not knowing what it truly holds and what it has missed. Vidura does not see the escape with his eyes. He feels it first as absence. Back in Hastinapura, the report arrives before dawn. The princes are gone, they say, burned. Kunti too, lost in the house at Varanavata. The messenger is ash-pale and shaking. The palace erupts. You know that particular palace sound now. Sandaled feet striking stone. Women crying out from within curtained rooms. Orders colliding with more orders. Conches sounding at the wrong hour. The smell of spent lamps, sweat and fresh tears. Dhritarashtra mourns loudly. Too loudly. Duryodhana mourns correctly. Too correctly. Shakuni is solemn. Dushasana furious with grief. Courtiers cover their heads. Servants weep because everyone else is weeping, and because maybe it is real and maybe it is not. And in a palace like this, you learn to cry first and sort out sincerity later. Vidura goes through the motions. He lowers his head. He speaks the required words. He allows no triumph to touch his face. But inside him, a knot loosens. He knows, not from proof laid in his hand, from pattern, from timing, from the shape of the disaster, from the private message that eventually reaches him, quiet as a moth landing. They are alive. That single knowledge changes the taste of the air. Not sweeter, just breathable. He endures the false funeral. He watches offerings made. He hears lamentations rise in the halls and wonders which sorrow in Hastinapura is genuine and which is merely dressed properly for court. Probably both. That is the trouble. Even wicked men can grieve. Even grieving men can lie. Time moves. The Pandavas disappear into rumor. Some say they became forest ascetics. Some say they were truly claimed by the blaze. Some say they wander disguised. Some say Bhima has become a mountain spirit and Arjuna a hunter among clouds. People will believe anything if the road is long enough. Vidura keeps his own counsel. Then one day, news comes from Panchala. A Swayamvara, a mighty bow, a target nearly impossible to strike. Kings and princes gathered in bright rivalry beneath fluttering banners, and among them a Brahmin youth who was no Brahmin youth at all. Arjuna, alive, not alone, all 5 brothers alive. Kunti, alive, and with them now, a woman whose very arrival changes the map of the family. Draupadi, the first reports of her come wrapped in marvel, dark as rain cloud, luminous as sacrificial fire, born from flame, proud enough to look directly at kings without blinking. Then comes the second astonishment. She is to be wife, not to one Pandava, but to all 5. Now that's the kind of news that makes old men choke on their evening milk. Hastinapura buzzes for days. Priests argue. Ladies in the inner chambers lean closer over betel trays and whisper so intensely, you'd think they were planning a coup of their own. Warriors pretend this is all perfectly understandable. It is not. Bhishma goes still in that particular way he has when destiny presents itself wearing strange clothing. Dhritarashtra calculates at once. A dangerous branch of the family has not only survived, it has allied itself with Panchala. Vidura, when he hears it, does not laugh. But perhaps privately, he allows himself one dry thought. Only this family could escape a house built to burn them alive, and come back with a marriage arrangement complicated enough to keep every court priest awake for a month. The city prepares. The Pandavas are invited back, publicly, warmly, with all the affection that had been so mysteriously unavailable when they were sent toward a very flammable residence. When they return, the streets flood with people. You can smell crushed marigolds underfoot, hear drums and conches rolling against the city walls. Women throw rice and flower petals from balconies. Children shout Bhima's name just because it is fun to shout. Arjuna rides quiet and bright-eyed. Yudhishthira carries himself with a gravity that has deepened. The twins gleam like polished copper in the sun. And Draupadi, she enters Hastinapura like a flame carried in careful hands. Silks the color of deep blue dusk, gold at her throat, fragrance of lotus and smoke, and something sharper beneath, like the first scent of rain-striking dust. She does not look overawed by the city. She looks as though she has come to test it. Vidura sees at once how much has changed. Not merely that the Pandavas live, not merely that they return stronger, but that the balance in the palace is now more delicate than ever. Draupadi is no quiet bride who will dissolve politely into the background while men arrange the world over her head. No, she has eyes that weigh people, a memory that keeps count, a dignity that could warm a house or burn it, depending on how she is treated. And there are now too many prides beneath one roof. For a little while, peace is patched together. Dhritarashtra, nudged by prudence and fear and the advice of those wiser than his impulses, agrees to division. The Pandavas will not remain at Hastinapura as rivals under one ceiling. They are given Khandava Prastha, rough and neglected land, thorny and half-abandoned. It is called a settlement. It is also a separation, safer that way, at least in theory. Vidura helps arrange it all. Boundaries, revenues, retainers, dignities, all the tedious pieces that keep men from reaching immediately for swords. He walks long hours in council chambers, heavy with ink, wax seals, and old paper. He listens to land arguments so dry they could put a horse to sleep. He settles disputes about grain, roads, wells, and tax rights. Important work, unbeautiful work, exactly the kind of work that keeps kingdoms from catching fire every 3 days. Still, even as the agreements are spoken, he knows this is not peace. It is distance, useful, necessary distance. You stand with him one evening on a terrace as the hot wind moves over the city. The stone beneath your feet has not yet released the day's heat. Down below, torchlight opens one courtyard after another. Somewhere, a veena is being played, soft and melancholy. Somewhere else, 2 men are arguing over horses, as if horses were the center of the universe. In a royal city, they often are. Vidura looks toward the dark stretch where the road to Khandavaprastha runs. He knows the Pandavas will make something from wilderness. Men like them always do. He also knows Duryodhana will hear of every success and suffer each one like a fresh wound. And he is right. The news begins almost at once. The wasteland is being cleared, roads laid out, wells dug, halls raised, traders arriving. Prosperity somehow, where scrub and dust had been. Then grander reports. Maya the architect. Marvels, splendor. A city blooming from nothing. Indraprastha. Even the name gleams. Each messenger who brings the news might as well bring oil and pour it straight into Duryodhana's ears. At supper, the prince grows quieter. In court, shorter-tempered. During festivals, harder to amuse. His brothers echo him. Karna stands nearer. Shakuni's hands remain very gentle on the dice. Vidura moves through these years like a man living beside dry reeds in late summer, hearing the first hidden crackles before anyone else admits the marsh can burn. He speaks when he can. He softens what he can. He watches who sits with whom, who leaves court together, who lingers after audiences, who speaks the Pandava's name with warmth, and who speaks it as if biting into stone. There is no rest in such vigilance. By day, petitions and policy. By evening, etiquette and ceremony. By night, listening. Listening to the palace settle. Listening to sandals whisper in corridors. Listening to rumor arrive dressed as gossip, complaint, flattery, or concern. It all arrives. It always arrives. And that is how he lives now, not in panic, in readiness, like a lamp kept trimmed before a storm. You feel it with him in the small things, the extra pause before a sealed letter is opened. The way his hand stills on the rail when Duryodhana laughs too suddenly. The faint resin smell in memory whenever someone proposes an outing, a gift, a generous invitation. The knowledge that danger in this family rarely comes roaring down the main road. It comes smiling through the side gate, carrying flowers. So the years move. The Pandavas thrive at a distance. The Kauravas simmer at home. And Vidura, prince without crown, counselor without illusion, keeps walking the halls at dusk while lamp smoke lifts in blue threads toward the rafters. He knows the house is not safe. He knows it has not been safe for a long time. He knows a fire survived Varanavata because it was escaped in time. The next one may begin in polished wood, under chandeliers, in full daylight, with everyone present and no tunnel left to dig. For now, though, the corridors are quiet. The night servants pad softly over cool stone. A bronze lamp trembles in a draught. Outside, beyond the palace walls, the city exhales into darkness. Jasmine opens in the gardens. Horses shift in their stalls. Somewhere, very far off, thunder mutters over the plain. And Vidura listens, because in a house already burning, the wisest man is the one who learns to smell smoke before the flame appears. Morning comes. Nothing is cleaner. The hall empties, but the shame does not. It hangs in the rafters, in the curtains, in the very dust, and Vidura still has to wake up there the next morning. The stone floors are cool under bare feet. Lamp smoke lingers low and stale. Crushed flowers from yesterday's ceremony have gone sour. Silk banners hang motionless in the still air, and every servant who enters does so softly, as if noise itself might offend the room. Vidura walks those corridors again. He does what he always does. He rises early. He hears petitions. He receives messengers. He speaks little. But something in the palace has shifted. The walls are the same polished stone. The pillars still carry their carved vines and lions. The gold still catches morning light. Yet all of it feels dimmer now. Because once a house has watched evil and stayed seated, it never feels entirely holy again. You can feel that in the air. It is not only grief, not only anger. It is a strange vacancy, like music has stopped, and nobody remembers who was supposed to start it again. But the day before this emptiness, before the forest path, before the loose hair and the exile road, there was the game itself. And Vidura knew. He knew almost from the moment the invitation was conceived. The summons had gone to Indraprastha, dressed in courtesy, fine words, family warmth, an invitation to an assembly, a game, a gathering among kin. That is how poison usually arrives in great houses, perfumed, polite, and wearing jewelry. Vidura had watched it being prepared. He had seen Duryodhana move about the court with that sharpened brightness in his eyes. He had seen Shakuni's fingers touch the dice as lovingly as priests touch prayer beads. He had seen Dhritarashtra hesitate, frown, sigh, and then do what he too often did, nothing firm enough to stop anything. The old king wanted innocence and advantage together, a difficult hobby. Vidura went to him before the game. He warned him plainly. He said this would not end in laughter. He said envy had already gone too far. He reminded him that a fire ignored in dry season does not become less dangerous because one closes the shutters. He urged him to refuse the match, to send the princes home, to deny Shakuni the board, to deny Duryodhana the spectacle. Dhritarashtra listened. That was the problem. He listened, he nodded, murmured, breathed heavily, and let the thing proceed. The day of the game arrived hot and bright. Outside, chariots flashed in the courtyard. Horses stamped and tossed their manes. White parasols drifted above noble heads. Conch shells sounded from the gates. The city, not yet knowing what kind of afternoon it was about to host, dressed itself as if for celebration. Inside, the assembly hall glittered. You step into it, and the coolness hits first. Marble, polished smooth. Long beams high above, painted and inlaid. Garlands looped from pillar to pillar. Ghee lamps burning with small steady flames. Perfume of sandalwood, camphor and lotus oil mixing with the faint iron smell of old weapons from the guards at the doors. At the center waits the board. Small thing really. The board waits at the center. Small enough to lift in 2 hands. Deadly enough to break a kingdom. Whole kingdoms can be ruined by objects small enough to carry in 1 hand. The dice rest beside Shakuni's fingers. The seats fill. Bhishma is there, white-bearded and stern, old as a vow. Drona sits rigid, learned hands folded, face unreadable. Kripa watches. Karna gleams with hard pride. Duryodhana sits forward, restless and eager. Dushasana wears anticipation, like a grin he cannot quite contain. Dhritarashtra, blind in body and clouded in judgment, waits to hear what the room will become. And Vidura stands where duty places him, not in the center, never in the center, close enough to see everything, far enough that power can pretend it is not ignoring him. Then the Pandavas arrive. Yudhishthira enters in royal cloth, calm-faced, grave, already carrying too much obedience inside him. Bhima comes like a storm, forced into human shape. Arjuna is controlled, watchful. Nakula and Sahadeva move with quiet dignity. They greet the elders, they take their places, formalities are observed. Politeness is laid down like fresh flowers over a pit. The room settles. Then the dice begin. You hear them first. Ivory on wood. Light, clean, almost delicate. An innocent sound. The sound stays light. The ruin behind it does not. Shakuni plays for Duryodhana. Yudhishthira, though he knows the danger, does not refuse. Honor, custom, pride, fatal habit, call it what you like. The hand still reaches. The first wagers go. Jewels, gold, chariots, servants, horses, treasures from distant lands. The words come smooth at first, almost ceremonial. Men speak in measured tones. Courtiers lean in. Silk rustles. Bracelets click. Somewhere in the back, a fan moves warm air scented with jasmine. Then Yudhishthira loses, and loses again and again. The rhythm changes. Each cast lands like a door shutting. Vidura watches the board, but more than the board, he watches faces. That is where kingdoms truly announce themselves. He sees Duryodhana's excitement brighten. He sees Bhima's shoulders harden. He sees Arjuna's eyes narrow. He sees elders becoming uncomfortable, then quiet, then very still. He speaks again, not softly now. He tells Dhritarashtra to stop it while there is still something left to save. He reminds him that a father who cannot govern his son is no protection to his house. He says Duryodhana is rushing toward ruin and dragging the Kurus behind him. He says this game is no game at all. The words enter the room and strike hard, but they do not move the hand-holding power. Duryodhana turns on Vidura with all the old resentment he has nursed for years. He mocks him for always favoring the sons of Pandu. He treats truth as insult. He speaks with the wild courage of a spoiled man who has never been meaningfully denied anything. Vidura answers with something sharper than anger, not volume, clarity. He tells him that sweet words are easy and useless. Bitter counsel is the kind that saves a fool from falling over his own pride. He warns him that those who delight in destruction often mistake applause for loyalty. Even now, in that hall, he offers him a chance to stop. Duryodhana does not take it. Of course, he does not. The dice fall again. Yudhishthira loses cattle, lands, his wealth entire. He loses the rich city he built. He loses the kingdom. The room is no longer at ease. Even those who came for entertainment now understand they are watching something darker. A terrible stillness creeps outward from the board. You can feel it on your skin. The air seems thicker. The lamps burn without flicker. Somewhere outside, faint and absurdly ordinary, a peacock cries in the palace gardens. Then the game crosses another threshold. Yudhishthira stakes Nakula, loses Sahadeva, loses Arjuna, loses Bhima, loses. By now the hall has become unreal, not enchanted, worse, orderly, official, formal, a place where catastrophe is being entered line by line, witnessed, recorded, and allowed. Vidura's face goes cold. He speaks to the king again, telling him this cannot continue. He says a man carried away by dice is no longer master of himself. He says the destruction of kin in public assembly will stain them all. The warning is no longer about policy. It is about the soul of the house. Dhritarashtra trembles, and still does not stop it. It is almost impressive, in a terrible way, how much damage can be done by weakness seated on a throne. Yudhishthira then stakes himself and loses. For one instant, there is a strange pause. You can hear fabric shift as someone inhales. A gold anklet chimes softly from the women's side beyond the screen. Even Shakuni's hand rests a moment above the board, because now the impossible has happened. The king has made himself a slave. There should have been an end there. There should have been. Everyone with grey hair in that hall knew it. Everyone who had ever heard even the outline of righteous conduct knew it. But Adharma, once invited in and seated comfortably, is rarely content with one course. Duryodhana asks what remains to be staked, and the answer comes: Draupadi. The name itself changes the room. Vidura's whole body tightens. This, he knows, is the cliff edge. He tells them at once that Yudhishthira, having already lost himself, has no right left over anyone else. He says the wager cannot stand. He says they are rushing into infamy. He says a woman of the house is not a gaming piece to be tossed between drunken egos. No one can claim they were not told. But Shakuni casts, and Yudhishthira loses. What happens next is the part that never leaves the stone. Duryodhana orders Draupadi brought to the hall, not invited, not sent for with honor, brought. Vidura speaks with open fury now. He calls the act monstrous. He reminds the assembly that she is the wife of the Pandavas, daughter of Drupada, queen of a royal house. He warns them that to drag her into this chamber will invite disaster no rites can wash away. But Duryodhana has gone too far to hear restraint. He sends a servant first. The man goes reluctantly, returns uncertain. Draupadi, in her chambers, has asked the one question none of them want to answer. If Yudhishthira had already lost himself, by what right did he wager her afterward? A perfect question, clean as a blade. It comes back into the hall and lands among them. No one likes it because it is not loud, it is not theatrical, it simply exposes the rot. The elders sit silent. Bhishma, great Bhishma, who can speak for hours on duty and lineage and order, struggles now. Drona does not rise. Kripa does not rise. The room full of men who know the law begins discovering all at once a passionate devotion to stillness. Vidura does not stay still. He says the question must be answered. He says justice cannot exist if those who know right from wrong become mute in the one moment it matters. He presses them. He demands a verdict. He is standing in a room full of decorated silence and trying by sheer moral force to make it human again. Duryodhana sends again, this time harder. And when Draupadi still refuses to come, asking the same question, Dushasana goes himself. You are in the hall when he returns. The sound reaches before the sight. Heavy steps. The rough scrape of force where force should never be used. A disturbance moving through polished space. Then Draupadi enters, dragged against dignity, against law, against decency itself. Her hair is disordered. Her single garment is pulled and strained from the handling. Her face burns with outrage, but she is not broken, not even close. If anything, the shame belongs to the hall more than to her. The smell in the room seems suddenly sharper. Oil lamps, heated silk, human fear. You can feel everyone seeing and not wanting to be seen seeing. Draupadi looks from face to face, not wildly, not helplessly. She looks like a queen taking inventory. She asks her question again. Did Yudhishthira lose himself first? If so, what right had he over her afterward? Let the elders answer. Let the wise men speak. Let the assembly declare what Dharma permits. The hall freezes around her words. Vidura supports her at once. He declares she has spoken rightly. He insists the wager is invalid. He warns that outrage against a blameless woman will drag the Kuru line into darkness. He tries, with every ounce of authority truth can lend a man without a crown, to stop the plunge. And then, for one brief breath, someone else rises. Vikarna, one of Dhritarashtra's own sons. Young, not usually the loudest, not one of the celebrated men. He says what should already have been said by those older and more honored. He agrees Draupadi was not fairly won. He points out the disorder of the game, the injustice, the broken sequence. In that terrible room, his voice sounds almost like rain after smoke. For a moment, you think perhaps shame might still work. But Karna crushes that moment. He speaks with the cruelty of an old wound given new opportunity. All the bitterness he has stored up against status, against rejection, against that old insult at her Swayamvara, comes pouring out. He treats Draupadi not as queen, but as spoil. He turns contempt into public entertainment. He tells them she may be handled as one without protection. The room drops another level. Some falls have steps. Duryodhana, intoxicated with triumph, gestures obscenely toward her and invites her to sit on his thigh. Bhima surges like a chained beast. His breath comes hard. The veins stand in his neck. If fury alone could split pillars, that hall would have come down around them. But he is bound, lost, a slave by the game's cruel terms. Draupadi stands in the center of men who have failed her and keeps asking for dharma. She does not beg for mercy. She asks for dharma. She does not beg for mercy from their moods. She asks for law, truth, righteousness, for the very thing the hall was meant to uphold. She asks the assembly whether it is still an assembly at all. Vidura hears in her words the final indictment of everyone present. He condemns what is happening again. He says plainly that ruin has entered the house. He warns Dhritarashtra that the cries of an insulted woman destroy lineages. He all but lays the future at the old king's feet and begs him not to choose it. Still, Dhritarashtra wavers, always the same, always one breath short of courage. Then Dushasana reaches for Draupadi's garment. The horror of that movement changes the air. No one is breathing normally now. The hall seems to tilt. Bangles are still. Armor straps creak as men half rise and stop. Somewhere, a lamp sputters once, then steadies. Draupadi, seeing human help fail one by one, turns her heart elsewhere. She calls inward and upward toward Krishna, not loudly, not theatrically, with the force of a soul reaching the only refuge left untouched. And then the miracle comes. The cloth does not end. Dushasana pulls and pulls, arms straining, breath roughening, pile after pile of fabric gathering on the floor like a flood of color. Red, saffron, blue, white, silks and folds, and endless lengths of it, while Draupadi remains covered, radiant with a protection no hall can claim credit for. The whole assembly watches. Even the wicked falter before a wonder. Dushasana tires. The cloth keeps coming. His strength runs out before her dignity does. That silence after, thick, stunned, almost sacred, is worse in some ways than the noise before. Because now everyone knows whatever excuses they had built for themselves have been blown open. The gods themselves have answered because the court did not. You can smell hot lamp oil and sweat and the faint sweetness of spilled perfume from some overturned tray no one remembers dropping. Bhima breaks the silence with vows. He swears he will one day bring down Dushasana and repay this outrage. He swears he will break Duryodhana's thigh for that vile gesture. His words roll through the hall like thunder trapped indoors. Arjuna is pale with contained fire. Nakula and Sahadeva are stricken. Yudhishthira sits crushed beneath the weight of what his own hand has done. That is part of the agony too. Vidura knows it. This catastrophe has enemies, yes, but also weakness in those who should have refused the first step. And still, the hall is not healed. It is Gandhari from outside the immediate frenzy and the terrible omens rising around them. And at last, Vidura's relentless pressure that begin to push Dhritarashtra towards sense. The old king finally speaks, not as indulgent father, but as frightened sovereign. He tries to mend with gifts what should never have been broken. He offers Draupadi boons. She does not ask for vengeance first. She asks for release, for Yudhishthira, then for his brothers. Even here, standing amid insult, she gathers her household back from the edge. It is a kind of royal grace the hall has not earned. Dhritarashtra grants it. Freedom, restoration, wealth returned, permission to go in peace. For one breath, one impossible breath, disaster seems to retreat. Vidura must have felt it then, that thin, aching relief, like cool wind before rain, like a patient who has stopped bleeding, though the wound is deep. The Pandavas prepared to leave. The hall loosens. Men begin to imagine that perhaps this nightmare will be spoken of in lowered voices and then buried. Perhaps shame will be enough. Perhaps family will survive one more self-inflicted blow. Then Duryodhana speaks again. Of course, greed does not know when it has already consumed too much. He cannot bear their release. He cannot bear not having completed the humiliation. Shakuni is ready at once, smiling that dry smile of a man who can smell weakness like spice in hot air. Another game is proposed. One last cast. One last arrangement. The stakes now. Exile. 12 years in the forest. 1 year hidden. If discovered, the cycle begins again. Vidura opposes it immediately. There is almost exhaustion in the force of him now, though the words remain sharp. He tells Dhritarashtra not to permit a second descent. He points to the ruin already at their feet. He reminds him that a king who cannot say no to madness becomes servant to it. But the old sickness returns. Dhritarashtra yields. Again. It is astonishing how many tragedies can fit inside a single afternoon when one man refuses to master his own household. The second game is brief. No grandeur left now. No suspense worthy of the name. Just machinery, a grinding wheel. Shakuni casts. Yudhishthira loses. And with that, the fate of 13 years settles into the room. No one cheers properly this time. Even victory tastes strange when the soul has gone out of it. The hall has what it wanted and looks sick from swallowing it. The Pandavas rise to leave. Draupadi goes with them, hair loose, vow alive inside her. Bhima burns. Arjuna is inward and deadly quiet. The twins move like men carrying a wound no bandage can cover. Yudhishthira is grave as winter. Vidura watches them pass. What can he do now? Offer comfort? It is too small. Offer strategy? Not here. Stop them. Impossible. The terms unjust and obscene have already been accepted before the whole court. So, he does the thing he has always done. He remains faithful in the space left to him. He speaks what care he can. He sees them with full honor as they go. He keeps his face steady when lesser men would either collapse or pretend nothing has happened. He stands in that ruined chamber and lets them know, if only by presence, that not every soul in Hastinapura consented. You follow them for a few steps in your mind. The scrape of sandals, the hush of cloth, the low murmur among attendants too frightened to say much. Then they are gone, out through the corridors, down the great palace ways, past carved doors and watching guards and silent women behind latticed screens, toward forest, toward hardship, toward the long debt this day has made inevitable. And Vidura remains. The hall grows emptier by the moment. Courtiers drift away in clusters, speaking under their breath. Some are ashamed. Some are merely relieved it is over. Some are already rearranging memory, which people do with surprising speed when their comfort depends on it. Bhishma leaves, carrying silence like armor. Drona leaves with his knowledge and his failure. Karna leaves hot with satisfaction he will one day regret too late. Duryodhana leaves triumphant, though the triumph already smells spoiled. Dhritarashtra stays behind for a while, broken by fear, but still not broken enough to change. Vidura stands in the after silence. The board is still there. The dice too. Small, pale, harmless-looking things. Servants come to gather the spilled cloth. It takes time. So much cloth. So much shame. They do not meet one another's eyes. One drops a folded length of silk and snatches it up as if the floor itself has become dangerous. The lamps burn lower. Day leans toward evening. Through some high lattice, A strip of gold light falls across the board, then slips away. You are there with him in that final quiet. You smell dust settling over sandalwood and smoke. You hear far-off temple bells from somewhere beyond the palace walls. You feel the cool stone under the long shadow of the pillars. The whole hall seems larger now, and emptier, and somehow less real than the pain it has caused. Vidura does not weep here. That would almost be easier. Instead, he carries the full knowledge of what has happened and what will follow. Exile, resentment, vows that will not cool, a kingdom outwardly intact and inwardly split. He has spoken every warning. He has spent truth lavishly. And still, Adharma has crossed the threshold, sat in the king's hall, and been served. Night comes slowly to Hastinapura. Servants extinguish lamp after lamp. One by one, the flames bow out, leaving lines of smoke curling upward in the dark. The great chamber falls into shadow. Its polished floor no longer gleams. Its banners hang like tired witnesses. And Vidura walks out at last into corridors that feel spiritually vacant, as if some protecting presence has withdrawn and left only stone, echo, and the memory of dice. 3 days pass. Nothing improves. Hastinapura wakes each morning exactly as if it has not shamed itself. Conches sound at dawn. Grooms brush the horses. Priests feed the fire. Courtiers knot silk sashes and adjust gold at their wrists. The cooks send up the smell of hot rice, ghee, cumin, milk simmered with cardamom. Water splashes in courtyards. Parrots shriek from carved balconies. Life goes on with the obscene confidence of a city that thinks routine can hide disgrace. Vidura walks through it all. You can almost hear his sandals on the cool stone, steady and unhurried, while everyone else either avoids his eyes or waits for him to fix what should never have happened. The palace still knows his step. Servants bow lower to him now, not because he has gained rank, because he was right. Dhritarashtra sends for him constantly. The blind king wants news. He wants reassurance. He wants to be told that the Pandavas are grieving but safe, angry but not beyond return, humiliated but still loyal to the house that humiliated them. He wants comfort in portions small enough to swallow. Vidura gives him truth instead, not always all at once. Dhritarashtra cannot bear that much truth in one sitting, but enough to sting, enough to keep a last lamp lit in that dim old mind. He tells the king that sin does not become clean because it happened in a royal hall. He tells him the people murmur in marketplaces and by the river steps. He tells him that a wrong done to the righteous does not sleep quietly. It follows. Dhritarashtra listens, then trembles, then agrees, then does nothing. That old pattern again, like a cracked wheel asked to carry a mountain. You are there in the chamber one hot afternoon when the king, restless and sweating, fingers the edge of his seat and asks after the sons of Pandu. Outside, the wind has died. The curtains hang heavy. Somewhere beyond the lattice, a peacock cries like a rusty hinge. Vidura tells him the brothers endure. They wear bark and deerskin. They keep their vows. Draupadi walks with them. Brahmanas still gather near them. Because hunger will follow a righteous king even into exile if it thinks he might somehow feed it. The king winces. He knows what that means. Even stripped of kingdom, Yudhishthira remains the kind of man people trust. Duryodhana, for all his silk and ivory and guarded gates, cannot buy that. There are ugly days too. One day Dhritarashtra, half mad with fear that Vidura's heart leans too warmly toward the exiles, lashes out. He tells Vidura to go where his loyalty truly lies. He throws cruel words with the clumsy force of a man who cannot control his own house and decides to strike the one honest person in it. Vidura does not shout back. He does something worse. He obeys. He leaves. The palace feels it immediately, like losing a supporting beam and pretending the roof is still fine. Servants whisper in corridors. Accounts tangle. Petty nobles start circling one another like dogs around dropped meat. Even the air seems meaner. Dhritarashtra lasts about as long as a man trying to steer a chariot after throwing away the reins. Then regret comes flooding in. He sends Sanjaya after Vidura, begging him to return. And Vidura, because he loves the house, even when the house does not deserve him, comes back. That is one of the sorrows of his life. He keeps returning to the fire with a water pot in his hands. Years pass that way. The Pandavas move through forests and hermitages, through monsoon rain and lean dry months, through pilgrimage roads crusted with dust. In Hastinapura, Vidura remains where duty has nailed him. He hears reports carried by travelers, sages, spies, traders, wandering priests. Arjuna has gone north in search of weapons. Bhima has ranged like a storm through wild places. Draupadi has suffered and endured. Yudhishthira still speaks gently, even when he has every reason not to. Vidura gathers these fragments and stores them carefully. He never speaks of the Pandavas as if they're gone forever. He speaks of them as weather moving back toward the city. Meanwhile, Duryodhana grows older without growing wiser. That takes talent. He struts through the halls in fabrics soft as clouds and temper hard as kiln brick. Karna at his side, Shakuni smiling that dry, clever smile of a man who would turn a family feast into a trap if given enough time and dice. Dushasana still thick-necked, still eager, still exactly the sort of brother no one should encourage. Sometimes Duryodhana rides out toward the forests simply to display his wealth near the exiles, as if bracelets were arguments and elephants were proof of moral superiority. Duryodhana rides out glittering with wealth, and still the spite around him smells stronger than the leather and perfume. Even those outings go badly. Humiliation seems to find him the way dust finds oil. And each time, Vidura watches the prince return a little more brittle, a little more dangerous, as though every embarrassment must someday be repaid by history itself. The seasons wheel on. Monsoon comes and drums on palace roofs through the night. Rainwater spills from lion-mouthed spouts. The courtyards smell of wet stone, neem leaves, damp earth, lamp smoke fighting the moisture. Then the skies clear, heat returns. Dust floats golden in shafts of afternoon light. Winter comes thin and brief, enough to cool the marble before dawn and make breath faintly visible in stable yards. Through it all, Vidura remains the same. Simple food, few ornaments, clear speech. He is the one ministers seek when boundary disputes flare. The one widows approach when a cousin has swallowed their inheritance. The one merchants trust to weigh a matter fairly. The one servants bless under their breath. If Bhishma is the great old pillar everyone reveres from a distance, Vidura is the beam people lean on daily, but reverence does not govern. The 13th year comes and goes. Whispers begin first, then certainty. The Pandavas have completed exile. They have survived concealment. They are no longer absent men in bark cloth somewhere under trees. They are claimants again, brothers again, warriors again. The city changes without admitting it has changed. Armorers work later by torchlight. Grain is counted more carefully. Messengers ride in and out with foam on their horses' flanks. Heralds speak more loudly than necessary. Astrologers become suddenly popular, which is always a bad sign. Men who have ignored wisdom for years develop a deep interest in omens the moment consequences come wearing boots. In Upaplavya, the Pandavas gather allies. In Hastinapura, Vidura begins trying once more to do the impossible. He urges Dhritarashtra toward peace, not grand, shining peace, not some impossible healing of every wound, just justice enough to stop the earth from drinking the blood of an age. Return their rightful shore, give them room to rule. Bend now, while bending is still cheaper than breaking. Dhritarashtra agrees. Of course, he agrees. Then Duryodhana enters, and agreement withers like a wet wick in wind. So embassies begin. Drupada sends a priest. Sanjaya goes to the Pandavas. Messages pass back and forth like cups of water between men trying to stop a forest fire with their hands. Vidura watches every one of them. He hears every report. He knows, almost from the start, how narrow the path has become. Then one morning, the city shivers with a different kind of news. Krishna is coming. You feel it before you see anything. The road outside the city has been swept. Fresh water has been sprinkled to hold down the dust. Garlands hang from gates. The smell of marigold, sandal paste, and churned mud rises in the warming air. Men in polished mail stand straighter. Women lean from balconies. Temple bells answer one another across the city. Duryodhana prepares a welcome worthy of a conqueror. Of course he does. Pavilions, feast tables, cushions thick as sleep, gold vessels, sweetmeats glazed with honey, spiced curds, rice white as jasmine, perfumed oils, music, a whole display arranged to say, see how honored you are here, see how magnificent we are, see how power smiles. And Krishna passes by it. Not rudely, not noisily, he simply does not stop. He goes instead to Vidura's house. That small house, that clean house, that house where no trap waits under the flowers. You enter with him in the cool of evening. The street outside is still buzzing with astonishment, but inside it is quiet. A lamp burns low. The clay floor has been swept smooth. Water stands ready in a plain vessel. The air smells of roasted grain, warm milk, tulsi leaves, and a little smoke from the cooking fire. Vidura sees him, and the whole room changes. There are meetings arranged by policy, and then there are meetings that feel like rain finally touching dry land. This is the second kind. He welcomes Krishna with the kind of joy that forgets protocol. His hands tremble, his face softens, all the weariness of years lifts for a moment. He offers what he has, not what would impress anyone. Simple food, a seat, water to wash, a heart without calculation. The palace can keep its jeweled plates. This meal is clean. Tradition remembers that Vidura, overcome with devotion, nearly forgets himself entirely. Some say he offered banana peels while setting aside the fruit. So full was he with love. Whether it happened exactly so or not, the feeling is true. That sort of welcome does not measure, does not perform, does not bargain. Krishna accepts everything gladly. You sit in that lamplight with them. You hear the night insects beyond the courtyard wall. You smell rice steam and ghee and the faint sweetness of ripe fruit. A breeze slips through the doorway and stirs the lamp flame. Somewhere far off, in the king's quarter, drums mark the evening watch. Vidura speaks plainly. He tells Krishna the court is rotten with pride. He tells him Duryodhana will not yield what he thinks strength can hold. He tells him danger waits inside the assembly. Men who cannot master an argument often dream of ropes. Krishna listens, smiling slightly. Not because the warning is small, but because nothing in it surprises him. Vidura urges caution. He would rather host a god quietly than see him insulted by fools in silk. Krishna tells him he has come because peace must be offered fully before war arrives. The chants must be real. The plea must be spoken in the open. Let everyone hear what was asked and who refused. So dawn comes, and with it, the embassy. The Kuru court gathers bright as a festival and tense as a bowstring. You can smell incense layered over sweat, polished wood, hot oil from the lamps, the sharp metallic tang of armor where warriors stand among counselors. Silk whispers, bracelets click softly, standards stir high above in the slow movement of trapped air. Dhritarashtra sits blind in the center of it all, listening with that desperate stillness of a man who has mistaken delay for control. Krishna speaks for peace. He does not ask for humiliation. He does not demand surrender. He lays out the road that still remains open. Return what is due. End the quarrel before it becomes a funeral pyre for the earth. At last, reduce the ask even further. 5 villages for 5 brothers, enough ground for honor to stand on, enough mercy to keep cousins from meeting with drawn bows. The hall hears him, Bhishma hears him, Drona hears him, Kripa hears him, Vidura hears every syllable like cool water poured onto burning stone. Even the old king trembles toward agreement. For a moment, a real moment, you can feel the room lean toward the possibility that disaster might still be turned aside. Then Duryodhana hardens. He refuses the kingdom. He refuses the compromise. He refuses the 5 villages. He would not yield land enough to fit the tip of a needle. There it is, the whole war already standing in the room in invisible armor. The elders try. Bhishma urges him. Drona urges him. Vidura strips the matter bare with words sharpened by grief and long patience. He reminds the prince of every warning, every insult, every near ruin already survived. He tells him pride is leading him toward a cliff. Duryodhana hears only opposition. Some men mistake restraint for weakness. They look at patience and think it is fear. They look at wisdom and think it is old age talking too much. Those men usually learn late, and by then the lesson is standing ankle deep in ash. And then comes one more outrage. Duryodhana, with Karna, Dushasana, and Shakuni in his confidence, thinks to seize Krishna in the court. Imagine it. A prince whose household is already collapsing decides the answer is to try capturing the one guest no rope could ever hold. This is what arrogance looks like when it has been fed too long. Not merely stubborn, but ridiculous. Word leaks because evil plots are never as secret as idiots think. Satyaki hears, Vidura hears, Dhritarashtra hears, and panics. He rebukes his son, but the rebuke comes with the usual royal weakness, all horror and no spine. Krishna stands among them all and lets the room understand exactly whom it thought to bind. The air changes, not with thunder exactly, more like the space inside the hall, suddenly becoming too large for walls. Faces blanch, eyes widen. Men who arrived perfumed and self-assured now look like boys caught insulting a storm. For an instant, the human frame of Krishna is not the only thing in view. Something measureless presses through it. Fire, sun, worlds, time, divinity, impossible to hold in one gaze. Then it is gone. Enough seen, enough understood. Not by Duryodhana, of course. Some blindness is chosen. When the assembly breaks, the chance for peace is broken with it. Vidura knows it. There is no triumph in being right, only fatigue, only a sorrow so old it has become part of the bones. He has spent years speaking into the crack between duty and desire, trying to wedge it open wide enough for Dharma to pass through. Now even that crack is sealing. Still, he does not stop. He warns Dhritarashtra again in private. The king's chamber is dim and close, smelling of medicated oil, old wood, and the bitter herbs burned to calm anxious minds. Outside, night settles over Hastinapura. The city murmurs with preparation. Wheels are greased, grain sacks stacked, harness checked. Men who have never seen real battle boast too loudly in courtyards. Vidura tells the king that a father who will not restrain one son will lose many sons. Dhritarashtra groans like a man already hearing distant lamentation. He clutches at Vidura's hands. He speaks of fate, of helplessness, of how things have gone too far, the favorite refuge of men who watched the road mile by mile. Vidura must be tired of hearing it. Then comes Kunti's private grief and another strange tenderness in these bitter days. She is still in Hastinapura, living under the roof of those who wronged her sons. Vidura sees her, speaks with her, carries the quiet burdens no herald records. A mother waiting while kingdoms posture. A wise man unable to promise safety. The palace around them glittering as if gold could soothe anything. At last, Duryodhana's conduct turns from stubbornness to open contempt. He no longer wants counsel. He wants applause. Vidura will not provide it. And so there comes a moment when staying would mean lending his presence to madness. Not obedience, not service, complicity. He leaves. No ceremony, no crowd, no dramatic flourish, just departure. You stand at the edge of the city with him in the pale light before sunrise. The eastern sky is only beginning to silver. The stones are cool underfoot. Bullock carts creak in the distance. Smoke from the first cooking fires rises straight in the still air. Dew clings to the roadside grass. Somewhere, a conch sounds from a shrine, soft and hollow through the morning mist. Vidura turns from Hastinapura. Behind him lies the city he helped hold together for most of his life. Its towers are washed faint, rose by dawn. Its banners hang almost motionless. From far off, it looks serene, which is the last insult. Cities are good at wearing calm when they are full of fear. Ahead lies the road toward the Pandavas. He goes not as a courtier now, but as a man refusing to stand inside a lie any longer. When he reaches them, there is grief and relief together. The brothers know what his arrival means. Another door has closed behind the hope of settlement. Another last warning has failed. Yet Vidura brings more than bad news. He brings himself, his loyalty at last, no longer divided by walls and titles, and the daily demand to advise men determined not to listen. The wind carries the smell of dry grass and horse sweat over the camps. Standards snap. Armor glints in the harsher light of open country. Around them gather kings, captains, elephants with painted foreheads, chariots lined axle to axle. The world is assembling for Kurukshetra. And still, even now, messages move. Even now, Dhritarashtra wants news, wants connection, wants the comfort of Vidura's presence, though he lacked the courage to honor Vidura's wisdom when it mattered. There are summons, regrets, appeals. The old king cannot bear to lose completely the one voice that kept him nearest to righteousness. So the road between camps and city is not closed all at once. Nothing in this family ever ends cleanly, but the shape of the future is fixed now. You can feel it in the camps at dusk, in the way men fall quiet while oil is rubbed into bowstrings, in the heavy breathing of tethered elephants, in the smell of leather, dust, clarified butter, sweat, and iron. In the flicker of watchfires stretching across the plain, like a second constellation fallen to earth, Vidura has spoken everything that could be spoken. He has pleaded, rebuked, warned, counseled, comforted, returned, endured, and left. Now the great armies draw together, and once the last advice has been thrown aside, there is nothing left but the sound of chariot wheels going out toward the plain. 3 days pass. Nothing improves. The smoke thins over Kurukshetra, but the sorrow does not. It settles instead into cloth, into hair, into the folds of old men's hands. Hastinapura is full again, yet it feels hollow. The conches are quiet now. No drums, no boastful heralds, only carts rolling slowly through the gates, axles creaking, wheels heavy with the last return from the field. Ash clings to everything. Ghee lamps burn even by day. The smell is strange. Sandalwood, funeral smoke, stale garlands, river water, and that dry, bitter scent of dust after too many feet have walked through grief. You step into the palace corridors, and even the stone seems tired. This is what Vidura had warned them about. Not glory, not victory songs, not some shining end where righteousness sits comfortably on a throne and everyone nods as if the trouble had been worth it. Just this: widows in pale cloth moving like sleepwalkers, servants whispering names and then stopping halfway through because the name belongs to someone who will never answer again. Dhritarashtra sits in darkness deeper than blindness. Gandhari sits beside him, veiled and still, carrying the weight of 100 sons. Like a mountain, no one can help her lift. And near them, as he has always been near them, is Vidura. Not grand, not ceremonial, steady. He knows where the king's hand will search before it moves. He knows when silence is mercy and when silence becomes poison. He knows that grief in a palace arrives wearing strange clothes. Sometimes it looks like weeping, sometimes anger, sometimes a king asking for water when what he really wants is his sons back. At night, Vidura sits with Dhritarashtra in a chamber cooled by thick walls and shaded lamps. The room smells of old wool, lamp oil, and medicinal herbs crushed in bronze bowls. Outside, somewhere down a corridor, an anklet chimes once and then is still. The blind king cannot sleep. Of course he cannot sleep. Sleep belongs to people whose hearts are not full of names. He reaches again and again for the same thoughts, his sons, his brothers' sons. Bhishma on his bed of arrows, Drona fallen, Karna gone. Duryodhana, proud to the end, now beyond all counsel. Each memory returns with a fresh edge, as if the mind is a child, prodding a sore tooth. And Vidura does what he has always done. He tells the truth gently enough to be heard. He tells Dhritarashtra that grief is natural, but drowning in it helps no one. He reminds him that all who are born must pass, whether in silk chambers or on open earth. He does not say this like a priest delivering polished wisdom. He says it like a man helping another man breathe through the night. He tells him kings are not exempt from the law that governs the smallest hut. He tells him attachment, when it grows wild, blinds worse than darkness. He tells him that the fire now burning in his chest was lit long ago, fed by indulgence, delay, and love without discipline. Harsh words, but wrapped in care, because Vidura has never enjoyed being right. You can feel the room as he speaks. The lamp flame bends in a small draught. The cotton sheet beneath the king's hand is rumpled and damp with the sweat of uneasy sleep. Somewhere incense has gone out, leaving only the faint smoky tail. Gandhari listens without interrupting. She does not need ornament now. Truth has stripped the court bare. Vidura tells the old king not to envy the dead and not to cling to what has already slipped away. He tells him the body weakens, wealth wanders, sons depart, kingdoms turn like wheels. A man who spends his last years clutching ashes burns his own hands for nothing. Some nights Dhritarashtra listens, some nights he does not. Some nights he breaks apart all over again, asking why fate spared him only to leave him empty. On those nights, Vidura does not flatter him with easy answers. He reminds him, quietly, of every warning once offered and set aside. Bhishma spoke, Drona spoke, Krishna spoke, Vidura himself spoke, until his throat might as well have turned to sand. The old king hears it now, because there is no longer any noise to drown it. That is the cruelty of late wisdom. It enters most clearly when the hall is empty. Daylight brings duties, funeral rites, consolations, audiences too painful to refuse. The Pandavas move through the palace like men carrying invisible weights across their shoulders. Yudhishthira, crowned at last, seems less like a victor than a man asked to sit on a seat made of vows and bones. Vidura watches him with deep, worn affection. He had once guarded these brothers as children, had sent warnings in coded speech, had stood between them and disaster where he could. Now they have returned as rulers, but the return tastes of smoke. You see them meet in quieter corners, a veranda at dawn, the stone floor cool under bare feet, a shaded passage where peacocks cry from the gardens below, a chamber where rolled maps lie untouched because no one cares about borders for one blessed hour. Yudhishthira bows to Vidura not as a king to a servant, but as a son to the one elder who never abandoned dharma for convenience. Vidura answers with the same sobriety he always has. No swelling speeches, no dramatic claims, only care. Eat, sleep if you can. Rule steadily. Do not let grief become negligence. The kingdom has suffered enough from men who could not govern themselves. It is almost funny, in a weary way. The one man who never wore a crown is still teaching crowned men how to stand upright in it. Time moves. Bhishma leaves the world. The pyres cool. The city learns how to make ordinary sounds again. Pots in kitchens. Stable boys laughing before they remember and stop. Temple bells at sunrise. Merchants laying out cloth in the market. Life, shameless and necessary. Coming back one small sound at a time. But old age has begun gathering the elders inward. Dhritarashtra and Gandhari live in the palace, yet they no longer belong to it. The rich meals set before them grow untouched. Jewel-bright fabrics no longer matter. Musicians play in distant halls for formal occasions, and their melodies drift thin and useless through the corridors. Vidura sees it first. The king has not only lost his sons, he has lost appetite for the machinery of living that once propped him up. Gandhari, stronger and fiercer than the palace ever deserved, has already turned toward austerity in her heart. Kunti too, after so many storms, grows quiet in a different way. These are people who have looked over the edge and no longer find comfort in carved railings. One evening, when the monsoon air hangs thick and the first thunder mutters far off beyond the river, Dhritarashtra makes his decision. He will leave. No more palace chambers, no more courtly condolences, no more eating the food of those whose fathers and sons fell because he could not master his own house. He will go to the forest with Gandhari. Kunti will go too. The announcement moves through the palace like a wind through old curtains. Servants stop mid-step. Courtiers blink as if someone has changed the shape of the world. Yudhishthira is shaken. Of course he is. He wants to serve them, comfort them, repair with duty what could never be repaired by policy. But some journeys cannot be cancelled by kindness. Vidura goes with them. That feels inevitable. Where else would he be? In some bright council hall, arguing tax grain with minor officials while the last old roots of his house walk into the woods? No. He has walked beside this family through everything shameful and sacred. He will walk beside them now when rank has thinned into age. So they leave, not with royal display. No elephants, no silk canopies, no trumpet calls, just bark garments, rough cloth, prayer, and the sound of sandals on the road. You walk with them for a little while. The air smells of wet earth and neem. Monsoon clouds gather low, blue-gray and swollen. The city walls fade behind curtains of rain. Gandhari's steps are measured. Kunti's face is composed in that hard, strange peace only long-suffering people sometimes wear. Dhritarashtra leans with care, old and heavy with memory, and Vidura, leaner now, quieter now, moves as if he has been preparing for this stripping away his entire life. In the forest, the world becomes simpler and more difficult at once. No court gossip, no polished floors, no servants rushing with trays and apologies because someone has offended someone else by standing in the wrong patch of sunlight. Only trees, wind, firewood, water, hunger arriving honestly. There is humor in it, if only barely. A palace can make a man believe he is essential because 6 people tie his sash before breakfast. The forest does not care. The forest would like you to gather your own sticks. Thank you very much. Vidura takes to austerity as if returning to an older language. He eats little, he speaks less. His body, never indulgent, grows spare as a branch in late summer. His eyes seem brighter for it, or perhaps simply farther away. The old concerns of court have fallen from him one by one. Not because he has stopped caring, because he has moved beyond the need to wrestle every fool into wisdom. Dhritarashtra still needs guidance, and Vidura gives it, not in crowded assemblies now, but under trees, by small fires that smell of damp wood, in twilight when cicadas thrum and the sky over the clearing turns copper, then violet. He tells the old king to turn his mind inward at last, to master anger before the body fails entirely, to release the endless counting of losses, to remember the self beneath the wreckage of role and title. He speaks of restraint, of discipline, of the soul not ending when the body is spent. He speaks as one who knows these things, not from recitation, but from living beside ruin without letting ruin claim him. Years pass this way. Then Yudhishthira comes to the forest. He comes out of love and duty, carrying the ache of a son visiting parents who have chosen a harder life than he can ease. The path is narrow, leaves brush his shoulders. The forest smells of dry bark, stream water, and fallen fruit beginning to sweeten on the ground. Birds call overhead in sudden bursts. Hermit fires thread pale smoke through the trees. He meets Dhritarashtra, meets Gandhari, meets Kunti, and asks for Vidura. But Vidura is no longer quite among them in the old way. He has gone deeper into austerity, wandering alone, clothed in almost nothing, living on air, on water, on the thin edge where a man stops belonging to ordinary appetite. They tell Yudhishthira this, and still he goes searching. You go with him. The forest is very still that day, not silent, never silent, but still in that way only old woods can be. when every sound seems placed carefully. A woodpecker tapping somewhere far off, leaves shifting high above, the faint crackle of sun on dry grass, your own breath suddenly louder than you expected. Then Yudhishthira sees him. Vidura stands beneath a tree, thin beyond thinness, dust on his limbs, hair matted, eyes steady. He does not come forward. He does not greet him with the gestures of court or family. Those have fallen away. He simply looks, and Yudhishthira, seeing him, stops. This is not the chambered statesman of Hastinapura, not the counselor in clean linen speaking hard truth before jeweled men. This is something quieter and stranger, a flame drawn to its last clear point. The king approaches slowly. The ground beneath his feet is soft with old leaves. The smell of sun-warmed bark and wild herbs rises around him. He is filled with reverence, sorrow, and something like fear. Because the moment has that feeling some moments have, the sense that if you move too quickly, the whole world will alter. Vidura leans against the tree. He fixes his mind on Yudhishthira, and then, in stillness deeper than speech, he lets go. No cry, no drama, no struggle. His life, his power, his long-kept dharma seems to pass into Yudhishthira like warmth passing from one lamp to another. The king stands motionless. The forest does not interrupt. A breeze moves through the upper branches. Sunlight flickers once over rough bark. Somewhere nearby, water runs over stone, patient and small. Vidura remains standing for a breath, perhaps two, and then he is only the still form beneath the tree. Yudhishthira does not perform funeral rites for him there. A heavenly voice restrains him, telling him Vidura's end is not to be handled as ordinary endings are, and that feels right. This life was never ordinary. He returns carrying no ashes, no relic, nothing the hand can hold. Only presence, only that strange transfer, only the certainty that the uncle who had warned, steadied, served, rebuked, protected, and endured had not vanished into emptiness, but returned to the deeper law he had always embodied. Back in the hermitage, the evening comes down softly. Smoke rises from small fires. The elders sit beneath trees while the last light gathers gold along the edges of leaves. And somewhere in that quiet, if you listen closely, you can almost feel him still there. Not as court official, not as prince, not as the man no one listened to until it was too late, as steadiness itself, as the clear mind in a burning house, as the hand that did not tremble. Night settles over the forest. The cicadas begin. The air cools at last against the skin. And one by one, the old voices grow gentle enough to follow into sleep. And now the palace grows distant. The lamps become stars. The voices thin into night air, and only his steadiness remains. So after all of that, when the shouting has faded and the dust has settled into the cracks of old stone, what remains of Vidura? Not a throne, not a victory procession, not a kingdom with his seal pressed into warm wax. What remains is something quieter, and in its own way, much harder to achieve. He lived inside a house built on rank, pride, inheritance, and old wounds. He was born outside the center of royal privilege and spent his life closer to truth than the men seated above him. That matters, because from the beginning, his life tells you that wisdom and status are not the same thing. They never were. Vidura could not inherit the crown. Everyone knew it. But he inherited something else, clarity. He saw people as they were. He saw consequences before they arrived. He saw that a kingdom does not fall in one afternoon. It falls by smaller acts first, by silence, by vanity, by one indulgence granted to a spoiled son, by one warning ignored because it is inconvenient before dinner. That is one of the deepest things his life carries. Dharma is not just some grand, shining act performed in public while drums beat and conch shells sound. Very often, Dharma is steadiness in a corridor. It is saying no when the room wants yes. It is speaking truth to someone you love, knowing they may never forgive you for it. You can feel that in his whole life. He served Dhritarashtra faithfully, but he never lied to him. That is a hard kind of love, the real kind. He did not flatter the blind king. He did not decorate ruin with polite language. When danger was still only a whisper, Vidura named it. When envy was still only a spark in Duryodhana, Vidura smelled the smoke already. When the lacquer house was prepared, when the dice game was proposed, when Draupadi was wronged in the hall, he spoke again and again, and nothing changed, at least not immediately. That part matters too, maybe more than anything else. Because a lot of people quietly believe that if you do the right thing, the world will reward you quickly and obviously. But that is not how the Mahabharata breathes. And it is not how Vidura lived. Dharma is not a bargain. It is not a coin you place before the gods, so they hand you comfort in return. Vidura followed Dharma because it was true, not because it was profitable. He spoke rightly because right speech was his nature. He warned others because that was his duty, even when they rolled their eyes, changed the subject, or stormed out in expensive silk, feeling offended. Royal households are wonderful at that. Give a prince enough jewelry, and suddenly he thinks advice is an insult. And still, Vidura kept going. That is where karma enters the room. Karma in this world is not just reward and punishment with neat little labels attached. It is ripening. It is consequence moving through time. A word spoken in anger may bloom years later as sorrow. A humiliation left unanswered may return as war. A father's weakness may become a son's arrogance, and that son's arrogance may become a field covered in the fallen. Vidura understood that. He knew actions do not vanish because people refuse to think about them. Dhritarashtra could delay. Duryodhana could mock. The court could pretend. But karma is patient. It ripens anyway. And then there is Maya. Maya is the great appearing, the glittering surface, the thing that looks solid until your foot goes through it. A palace can feel permanent. A dynasty can feel unshakable. A prince can believe his power is as firm as carved stone. But the Mahabharata keeps showing otherwise. One afternoon in a dice hall can crack an empire. One insult can echo for years. One refusal to stop evil when it is still small can turn all that gold, all that silk, all those standards and thrones into smoke and ash. Vidura saw through that illusion almost from the start. He knew the palace was not safe because it was grand. He knew power was not righteous because it was inherited. He knew legality was not the same as justice. And when Krishna came, Vidura recognized something deeper than politics. Others prepared displays. Vidura offered simple food, honest welcome, unstained devotion. That moment tells you everything. He knew how to honor what was real. Not appearance, not spectacle, presence. Then, after the war, when everyone else was left holding grief like broken pottery in their hands, Vidura did what he had always done. He stayed near suffering without turning away. That may be the tenderest part of his life. He warned before disaster. He endured during disaster. And after disaster, he still cared for the broken. He did not become bitter and say he had been right all along, though frankly, he had earned the right to be unbearable about it. Imagine it. One grand speech beginning with, "I told all of you this would happen." He never does it. Instead, he helps the Dhritarashtra live through the wreckage. He guides the old king toward restraint, austerity, and finally toward release. That is wisdom with compassion, not just correctness, and that is the final shape of his life. Vidura shows that truth spoken without attachment is never wasted. It may not prevent every disaster. It may not win applause. It may not place a crown on your head or save you from loneliness. But it is never wasted, because truth does its work in ways you cannot always see. Sometimes it saves lives in the night. Sometimes it stands beside the humiliated, so they are not entirely alone. Sometimes it becomes the one clear memory left in a ruined house. Sometimes it waits years, then returns as the only voice that still makes sense. That is what his life meant. Not that the wise always win, not that kings always listen, not even that good counsel prevents sorrow. Something gentler, something stronger. That dharma is worth keeping even when the world around you drops it. That karma ripens whether people admit it or not. That maya can make pride look powerful, but only for a while. And that a human being who clings to truth with a clean heart becomes, in the end, more enduring than 1,000 noisy men on carved thrones. So, if you carry anything out of these corridors and forests tonight, let it be this feeling. That steadiness matters. That clear seeing matters. That speaking rightly matters, even in a room determined to misunderstand you. And that no sincere act done in dharma is ever truly lost. The palace forgets, but you can still smell the lamp smoke in those corridors. You can still hear the last echo of sandals on cool stone. Time does not. The soul does not. And somewhere beyond the wreck of dynasties, beyond applause and insult, beyond winning and losing, that quiet fidelity remains whole. That is enough, more than enough. And if you gather the whole of his life together, that becomes the final comfort of it. Vidura did not fail because others refused him. He did what Dharma asked of him at every stage. As a child, born near power, but not welcomed into its center, he learned to see clearly without craving the throne. As a counselor, he used that clear sight in service. As a witness to envy, deceit, and public shame, he kept speaking when silence would have been safer. As an elder after the war, he stayed with the broken instead of turning away from them. And at the end, he laid even that burden down. That arc matters, because the story does not leave you with the idea that righteousness means controlling outcomes. It leaves you with something steadier than that. You are responsible for your conduct, for your speech, for whether you keep faith with what is true. You are not always given the power to make other people wise. Vidura never had that power. No one does, but he never let another person's blindness become his own. And that may be the most practical form of dharma the epic offers. Not perfection, not purity untouched by the world, just the refusal to let greed, fear, vanity, or despair dictate your inner life. The court around him grew louder, crueler, more deluded. Vidura grew clearer. That is why he feels so restful after a story this painful. He is one of the few people in the Mahabharata whose center stays clean, not untouched by sorrow, certainly not untouched by frustration, but not corrupted. He shows you that it is possible to live among confusion without worshipping it, possible to serve imperfect people without becoming false yourself. Possible to grieve deeply and still remain aligned with something higher than grief. And that is where the spiritual meaning settles. Dharma, karma, maya, they are not abstractions here. They become visible in a life. Dharma is Vidura, speaking what is right. Karma is the court, reaping what it kept sowing. Maya is the glitter of rank and ceremony that made weak men feel secure while disaster was already inside the house. Vidura sees through all three layers of confusion, and because he does, he becomes the rare person who can still help others when everything collapses. So after all the vows and insults, all the smoke and chariot wheels, all the long speeches and longer grief, the memory that remains is simple. A man walking calmly through troubled corridors, a voice that did not flatter, a mind that did not wobble, a heart that kept serving truth, even when truth was unwanted. That is what the storytellers wanted to leave with you. Not merely the tragedy of a family that would not listen, but the presence of one person who did listen inwardly and lived from that listening. And in the end, that is its own kind of victory. Quiet, unadorned, hard won. A victory no dice can take away, no prince can insult, no war can fully burn. It simply remains. Night settles more deeply now. The arguments have spent themselves. Hastinapura grows quieter in a different way now. Not peaceful, just emptied out, as if too many strong voices have spent themselves at once. The corridors still hold the coolness of stone. Lamps still burn with that small, steady smell of ghee and smoke. Silk still hangs in carved chambers, but the old heat of ambition is gone. You can feel it when you walk there. Bare feet on polished floors, a servant carrying water in a bronze vessel, a guard half asleep beside a pillar. Somewhere sandalwood lingers from evening worship. Somewhere old garlands have begun to dry, giving off that faint, sweet bitter scent of flowers past their hour. Vidura is no longer hurrying through these halls with warnings in his chest. No urgent message tucked under calm words. No king calling for counsel only to ignore it. No prince bristling at truth like a horse at cold river water. The rooms remember him anyway. This doorway where he paused before entering Dhritarashtra's chamber. That long assembly hall where he stood nearly alone while pride strutted about in gold. That side passage where servants used to catch his sleeve and ask small, practical things, because kings might command a kingdom. But Vidura knew where the grain was stored and which quarrel needed soothing before sunrise. He had never worn the crown. Still, the house leaned on him. That is the strange thing. The men with jewels thought themselves pillars. The quiet one was the beam holding the roof. And then, at last, even he walked away from carved walls and royal burdens. You follow him in memory toward the forest. The air changes again as the city falls behind. Dust gives way to leaf mold. Hot stone gives way to shaded earth. The wind comes, carrying river damp, bark, wild tulsi, and the faint green smell of things that do not care who ruled yesterday. Birds call from upper branches. Insects hum like tiny spinning wheels in the dusk. Vidura had spent so long among people who would not listen that the silence of the woods must have felt almost kind. Not empty, kind. There, the old counselor grew leaner, quieter. The edges of court life fell away from him one by one, like ornaments removed at the end of a long ceremony. No council robes, no formal seat, no herald announcing who entered and who left. Only the rough feel of bark cloth, the touch of dust on skin, the cool wash of river water before dawn. You can see him beneath the trees, a thin figure, composed as ever. A man who had carried a kingdom in his mind and set it down without fuss. A flame, burning smaller now, but somehow clearer. When Yudhishthira came to him in those last days, the meeting held that deep stillness forests sometimes keep at noon. No palace noise, no conch shells, no clatter of weapons, only leaves shifting overhead and one last exchange beyond the reach of ordinary grief. Vidura had already traveled far inward by then. He had done what he came to do, warned, served, endured, stayed honest in rooms where honesty was expensive. And when the end approached, it did not come with drums. It came like breath thinning into air, like a river joining something wider, like a lamp, carefully guarded from wind all night, finally offered back to the dark without fear. You stand there a moment with Yudhishthira. The forest floor is dry beneath your feet. There is a smell of sun-warmed roots and fallen leaves. Somewhere, a woodpecker knocks softly at a trunk, patient as fate. Nearby, a stream moves over stones with a sound so gentle it almost seems imagined. No one needs to say much. Some lives end with victory shouts. Vidura's ends with recognition. The king sees him, truly sees him, perhaps too late, as so many did. But even late sight is still sight. Back in Hastinapura, years will keep passing. New duties will come. Old names will be spoken with reverence, regret, or both. Children will hear of Bhishma on his bed of arrows, of Arjuna and Karna under the reddening sky, of Krishna's smile before impossible things. And if the telling is honest, they will hear of Vidura too. Not the loudest, not the strongest, not the one with a divine weapon humming in his hand, the one who kept his balance, the one who could walk through a burning household without carrying its madness into his own heart, the one who told the truth to blind love, to wounded vanity, to swaggering cruelty, to exhausted sorrow, the one who did not inherit power, yet carried responsibility as if it had been laid in his palms by the gods themselves. You remember him best, perhaps, not in the great crises, but in smaller moments. A lamp cupped against a draught, a measured step in a corridor after midnight, a hand lifted gently to stop a foolish word before it became a disaster, a face neither flattering nor afraid, a voice entering an unworthy room and making it, for one breath, more worthy. Outside, the night settles over forest and palace alike. Crickets stitch the darkness together. The river keeps moving. From distant shrines comes the faintest bell, soft as a drop of silver falling through air. Stone cools, ash cools. The day gives up its last heat, and somewhere in the memory of Hastinapura, down a corridor washed in moonlight, a single lamp still burns steadily beside a doorway. No applause, no fanfare. Just that small, unwavering flame. As if wisdom had taken human shape for a while, walked barefoot over cool stone, spoke plainly, and then passed into silence. The kingdoms fail, the banners fray, the proud voices fade, but not that steadiness, not that quiet light. It remains like sandalwood in old wood, like prayer in walls, like a path through trees you can still find by touch if the night is calm enough. And deeper in the forest, where the wind moves through the leaves with the sound of distant silk, Vidura is gone from sight. Only the hush remains, only the lamp, only the road within the dark, still true.